Chapter 1377. On the observation platform, several Western wasteland cultivators had nervous expressions. Before this, they had already discovered that on the small world fragment, there were movements from that race. The news was reported up, and the Sixth Highness ordered them to closely monitor the situation. Although they didn't know what was happening, everyone could feel the chill of an imminent war. Between the Western wasteland and that race, they feared there would soon be a war. Their senses were sharp and accurate, but they never imagined that this war that would engulf the Western wasteland and destroy that race would begin with their deaths. Darkness surged, and a figure walked out. The alarm on the observation platform instantly responded. They only had time to say a single word before they were forcefully swallowed back down. Their eyes widened, filled with horror and endless fear. The person that walked out from the darkness attacked without hesitation. A wild strength rushed out like a river breaking through a dam, rushing towards them with unstoppable momentum. In that instant, the entire observation platform was torn to pieces by this formidable strength. All of the Western wasteland cultivators that were busily working on it died, without even a corpse remaining. A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The complexions of the Western wasteland cultivators on the small world fragment changed. They rushed out from all directions. Chinyu laughed. Today, I will let everyone in the dark world know that the soulless world is not a place where you can rampage as you please. His feet slammed down, and he shot into the skies. In the next moment, miserable screams erupted. With a deep rumble, the several Western wasteland cultivators at the very front were blown to pieces. Within his room, Li Yijo's eyes shot open. As he listened to the screams and explosions, a sharp light burst out from his eyes. They're finally here. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. He stood up and pushed open the door. Li Yijo's eyes fell on the two Western wasteland true sages. I will have to trouble you two to ensure my safety. The two Western wasteland true sages cupped their hands together. Your Highness, rest assured, if we can save you, then we will. But if we can't, then that means your luck is bad. Li Yijo could guess what the two were thinking. He furrowed his eyebrows. Where was his backbone? St. Zhou Yin. But at this time, it was too late to look for him. He flew into the air and looked at the area where the chaos erupted. His pupils shrank. Broken world wandering cultivators. They were the first to attack. But since they did, that race would soon join the battle. Good timing. I fought alone, and even in a weakened state, I still fought without retreating, swearing to protect the interests of the Western wilderness. If this matter were to spread out, who would be qualified to compete with me for the throne? Li Siji began to pray, hoping that the one descending from the Western desolation would arrive a little later, giving him a more ample stage to perform. The broken world rogue cultivators had made their move. Even though there was only one person, the disturbance he caused was extremely shocking. The angry roars of the Western wilderness cultivators and the miserable screams before their deaths could be faintly heard. Yao Tao said, Senior Xian Zhouxing has already made his move. Are you still not going to order your people to attack? 32-7 paused for a moment, then slowly said, Where are the other experts of vast Yang? Why do I only see Sir Sage Jiusheng? Yao Tao rolled her eyes. Does young master not know what it means to catch the enemy off guard? The seniors of Haoyang are hiding around the battlefield, waiting for an opportunity to give the dark world a heavy blow. Young master, let me remind you that if the nobles don't act now, they might send the wrong message to the seniors, causing them to make other decisions. This was clearly a threat. It could be understood that if they did not make a move, the vast Yang itinerant cultivator would not entertain them. The foreheads of Ling Xiao, Xian Ji, Ruan Jing, and Zhou Lei broke out in cold sweat. They carefully glanced at Yao Tao and thought to themselves, Your aunt is indeed your aunt. Her courage and insight are not something we can compare to. Her acting is also very good. The more they thought about it, the more realistic it seemed when she rolled her eyes. No wonder she could pair up with Miss Jiao. In the main hall, everyone from that clan had a gloomy expression on their faces. If not for 327 raising his hand to stop them, all sorts of reprimands would have already been directed at them. Yao Tao's words could not be completely trusted. However, if they were in her shoes, 327 would not agree to it. As they charged forward, the rogue cultivators of the broken world sat back and watched the show. Of course, more importantly, allying with the broken realm rogue cultivators was the best option for that race. If they could endure it, they would endure it. All right, since Sir Sage Jiuxing has made his move, the rogue cultivators have shown their sincerity. Let's take action now. 327 stood up, took a deep breath, and said in a loud voice, "The people of the dark world have plotted to harm our people in the dark. They have evil intentions and wild ambitions. Today, our people rise up in resistance, and we will definitely make the dark world pay the price they deserve." Shout before the battle begins. Shouting this slogan did not only give them a psychological advantage. More importantly, there was a mysterious power of destiny that supported them. This point was extremely mysterious, but it truly existed. There is no need to explain it here. In short, after 327 gave the order, the cultivators of that race that had been waiting for a long time rushed out like a pack of hungry wolves that had just broken out of their cage. They crazily charged towards the fragment of the small world. The little king and little king had fought openly and secretly for many years, wishing that they could tear each other to shreds. It could be said that their hearts were already filled with hatred. Today, they finally had a chance to vent it all. All of them were filled with fighting spirit. Li Siji took a deep breath. He lifted a finger and said, "That race has plotted to harm Western Wasteland. Their crimes cannot be forgiven. Follow me and kill the enemies. Afterwards, everyone will be rewarded. Kill for me." They were like two yaks that had already gathered all their strength to fight. The moment both sides rushed out, they erupted with their strongest strength. They did not hide anything at all. In their hearts, there was only one thought: kill them all. The result of this was that the slaughter between Western Wasteland and that race entered a white-hot state as soon as the cultivators of both sides came into contact. 327 had a dignified expression. He locked his eyes on Yao Tao. "My race has already gone all out. I hope that vast Yang sect's wandering cultivators will not disappoint me. Otherwise, don't blame me for tearing up our previous agreement." Tearing up their agreement meant that they would no longer be able to guarantee their safety. But the deeper meaning was, all of you can just wait to die. Yao Tao had a calm expression. "Don't worry, we won't die." On the surface, it seemed like she was vaguely replying to 327's previous words. But in truth, Yao Tao was only stating a fact that she believed in herself. The mission that Qin Yu had given them was to cause war between Western Wasteland and that race. And looking at the current situation, their mission had already been accomplished. In other words, they could leave at any time. As long as they could leave, Yao Tao was confident she could escape. Although bringing along Ling, Xiao, and the others was a bit of a burden, it wasn't too much of a problem. 327 could feel the calmness and ease in Yao Tao's words. But he would never have imagined that the reason for her calmness and ease was completely different for what he thought. Ha! That race has already made their move. The Western Wasteland will not be able to escape today. Today, I will take revenge for the broken world wandering cultivators that died at your hands. Qin Yu laughed out loud. He rushed into the crowd of Western Wasteland cultivators and began a slaughter. Broken limbs were crushed by a wild strength, turning into a fog of blood that blocked everyone's line of sight. Li Yizhou's eyes were cold and gloomy. That race was truly a bunch of idiots. Even if they joined forces with the broken world wandering cultivators, the most they could do was use each other. Yet, they actually told him everything that involved the desolate region. If so, then he couldn't let these broken world wandering cultivators go. Once the super powerhouses of the Western Wasteland arrived, he would kill them all. The relationship between the desolate region and the broken world couldn't be exposed right now. This also involved some sort of unknown destiny. Li Yizhou didn't know the exact reason, but keeping this a secret was a rule that all those from the desolate region that came to the broken world had to abide by. If it weren't for this, all sorts of news regarding the desolate region and the broken world would have spread through the entire vast Yang world. But now, it was obvious that the clan had completely turned their backs on this. In the blood fog, Yu didn't know that in order to strengthen the broken world wandering cultivators, he had joined forces with that race. Just a casual shout from him caused Li Ijo's killing intent to rise. Of course, even if he knew, he likely wouldn't care, because this time he didn't plan on letting Western Wasteland or that race off to begin with. Did he want to kill them all to keep this secret? Haha, he should first think about how he was going to survive. When your two sides are about done fighting and you've used up all your cards, it will be my turn to reap the harvest. In truth, Qin Yu's entire plan was simple, provoking the Western Wasteland and that race to fight to the death, exhausting each other's strength and becoming the final fisherman to reap the benefits. But to accomplish this wasn't an easy matter. The Western Wasteland and that race weren't fools. In fact, it could even be said that Li Ijo and 327 were both smart people and possessed a terrifying strength. If there was even the slightest mistake in the process, it would bring a calamity upon themselves. Dancing on a steel wire, carving a dragon and phoenix on a knife point, this was probably what Qin Yu was doing right now. If he could do it, then strength first and luck second. But what about someone else? That person would have long since turned to dregs. Didn't you see the shocked expressions on Ling Xiao and the others' faces when they learned that it was Qin Yu who had single-handedly orchestrated this entire situation? He had already started the battle. Now, all he needed to do was preserve his strength and wait for the harvest to arrive. In other words, Qin Yu had decided to leave. If this weren't the case, why would he need to make such a bloody scene? Killing people was killing people. Unless there was a special need, any actions that wasted strength for this were stupid in Qin Yu's eyes. He certainly wasn't stupid. So, beneath the cover of the blood fog, Qin Yu suddenly restrained his aura and changed into the Western Wasteland cultivator he had just killed. His face was covered in blood, and his eyes were filled with panic. He turned and mixed into the crowd. After a few flashes, he silently withdrew from the bloody, mist area. In this boiling battlefield that was like a pot of rotten porridge, no one would notice the whereabouts of a certain inconspicuous little cultivator. The jade slip in his hand suddenly shook. Ling Zhao's eyes flashed. Mr. Ninth's signal had arrived. This meant that the plan had been completed and they could withdraw at any time. Yao Tao glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. Ling Xiao nodded imperceptibly. At this moment, she pouted and wondered if she should accidentally leave Ling Xiao behind here when she was about to escape. She always felt that this stinky brat was actually more trusted in front of Qin Yu than she was. This was a very, very infuriating matter. Ling Zhao's complexion changed. He suddenly felt very cold, and all the hairs on his back stood up. This felt like the second time, but he really hadn't done anything dangerous. Just what was going on? Could it be some sort of sensing of the future? In other words, he might be in trouble. Thinking of this, Ling Xiao subconsciously took several steps closer to Yao Tao. His Ani gave him a powerful and mysterious feeling, completely different from the rumors. If he followed her, he should be a bit safer. But in this world, there were many things that couldn't be completely carried out according to one's will. This was because, although there was only one chessboard, it was impossible to know how many people were laying down their pieces. Just as Qin Yu was preparing to withdraw and wait for the final harvest, and Yao Tao was thinking about whether or not she should abandon Ling Xiao, a group of cultivators suddenly rushed out from the battlefield, hurtling towards the Western Wilderness cultivators. Their identities were Broken World Rogue Cultivators. Their auras were completely different, so it was easy to recognize them with just a single glance. Like this, an accident occurred without warning. This time, including Yao Tao, Ling Xiao, and the others were all stunned, thinking to themselves, what was going on? Didn't Mr. Ninth say that this was a fake plan? Didn't he say that the mysterious race had joined forces with the vast Yang rogue cultivators to strengthen the hatred between them? How could the fake plan suddenly become real? There really were vast Yang rogue cultivators that had joined forces with that race to attack the world of darkness. Fortunately, they still remembered the fact that they were acting as extras, so they tried hard not to show too much of their shock. 327 let out a long breath. He smiled and cupped his hands together towards Yao Tao. "Miss Peach Girl, I was the one who offended you before. Since the rogue cultivator camp has attacked with all their strength, I will abide by my promise and allow you to leave." Yao Tao glanced at the stiffened Ling Xiao from the corner of her eyes. She thought to herself, "You smelly brat, your luck is quite good." She nodded and said, "If that's the case, then we will bid our farewells." She turned and left. Ling Xiao and the others hurried to follow. They were also confused and urgently needed an explanation. After leaving the group, Xianji was the first to speak up. "Auntie Peach Girl, what is going on here?" Yao Tao turned around and looked at the messy battlefield. Her lips curved up and she slowly said, "What else could it be? It's clear that there is another player hidden in this chessboard from the looks of it. It seems they want to take advantage of the situation and pluck the peach that Qin Yu has raised." Someone wanted to pluck the peach. After his initial surprise, Qin Yu's face darkened and a cold chill surged in the depths of his eyes. In particular, he saw the broken world rogue cultivators that rushed towards the Western desolate cultivators. Although their attacks were swift and fierce, they didn't entangle with them at all. Instead, they crossed through the battlefield, faintly weaving together into a net as they advanced. Their goal was Li Yizhou. With this, he could basically confirm that the other party's goal was the same as his. They wanted to obtain the key on Li Yizhou's body. The mountain of flames was surrounded by super violent space turbulence. If one wanted to enter, they could only rely on the ship above their heads. And to open the ship required the key. It was a fact that Qin Yu wanted to destroy the Western Desolate in that race. But his original intention had always been to obtain the key and then collect the ever-burning flame. With the help of the furnace, he could completely condense the Great Tao and save Peach Girl's life. So, in Qin Yu's eyes, it was as if he had finally managed to sit down at a table after suffering untold hardships. Just as he was about to eat, several people came over and lifted the table away. Chapter 1378. What should he do in this situation? According to his personality, he would definitely retaliate. If they dared to stretch out their hands, if they dared to stretch out their legs, they dared to cut off their hands. But the current situation clearly didn't allow him to use such violent methods. But he definitely wouldn't allow himself to suffer a loss. He stared at this group of people that had suddenly appeared and wanted to take away his table. His eyes turned, and he suddenly had an idea. Perhaps he could make use of this group of peach-picking people. Li Yizhou felt his heart skip a beat. It was like something terrifying was about to happen to him. He turned his head and saw the two Western Wasteland true sages following him. He didn't feel at ease at all. What was going on? He took a deep breath and suppressed the panic in his heart. He looked around the battlefield. Although the Western Wasteland was fighting 1 against 2, they didn't show any signs of losing. The battle was in a stalemate. So where did this feeling of danger come from? Suddenly, Li Yizhou's complexion changed. Several broken world cultivators appeared in his vision. Each one of them was tyrannical, and the Western Wasteland cultivators were no match for them. Damn it! When did these broken world rogue cultivators appear? He had never seen these unfamiliar faces before, and they were all incomparably strong. No, they're coming for me. The moment this thought appeared in his mind, Li Yizhou felt his hair stand on end. He finally understood the reason for his heart skipping a beat. His eyes widened in fear, and he pointed a finger. "Stop them!" The Western Wasteland cultivators moved according to the order. They rushed out like waves crashing in from all directions, forcefully blocking the Western Wasteland cultivators. Li Yizhou calmed down a little. He quickly drew back and subconsciously looked up at the sky. He suddenly changed his mind. Who knew the broken world rogue cultivators would be so strong, and they were clearly coming for him. The Western Wasteland super powerhouses should come sooner, otherwise the situation might spiral out of control. Bang, bang. There was a thunderous explosion, and wild fluctuations of strength swept out. The Western Wasteland cultivators that rushed forward all spat out blood from their noses and mouths. They were sent flying away like rags. The auras of the three broken world wandering cultivators were like rainbows. They charged out like stones falling down a mountain, shaking the void and making loud, rumbling sounds. They were like arrows released from a bow as they charged at Liijo. After realizing that their plan had been seen through, they didn't hesitate and chose to attack. They had to suppress Liijo and take his key. "Sages, save me!" Liijo screamed and continued to retreat. The three rogue cultivators in front of him were all at the true sage level. Furthermore, the most frightening thing was that they did not seem to fear the suppression coming from the world Zeroth as they wantonly released their might. Powerful and ancient. That's right, it was the kind of aura that could be clearly felt from every single strand of raging, surging, powerful energy that had been contaminated by countless years. It was them, the ancient true saints of the broken world, who had hidden themselves from the world. These people had never bothered themselves with worldly affairs, and they had never left their lair for tens of millions of years. All they cared about was breaking through to the sovereign realm. Why would they suddenly make a move today? No, it definitely wasn't a sudden attack. It seemed that this group of old monsters had been waiting for an opportunity to brazenly attack today. As for why they didn't hide it any longer, of course, it was because they could sense that the ever-burning flame might contain a sovereign lord's relic. They had never given up. Liijo was furious. He would never have guessed that a group of shattered world monsters would suddenly attack him and force him into a dangerous situation. As he retreated, he screamed, "The super experts of the Western Wastelands are about to descend into the world Zeroth. If any of you dare to attack me, you will be sentenced to death." Of course, this was meaningless. To a group of old monsters who had lived for countless years, the passing of time had lost all meaning. Their only desire to live on was to become stronger. As long as there was a chance, they wouldn't miss it, and Liijo's guess was correct. They didn't leave their seclusion, but they had never stopped paying attention to certain places. For example, the world Zeroth, the place where the sovereign perished. According to the legends, there was a sovereign lord's relic that could possibly help them break through the shackles of their cultivation and become sovereigns in a single step. Of course, they wouldn't miss out on such an opportunity. However, old people tended to be patient. Thus, for a very, very long time, these old monsters had perfectly concealed their greed. Whether it was the Western Wastelands or that other race, they hadn't been able to detect their existence. In this long period of time, these old bones weren't completely clueless. On the contrary, they must have learned a lot of things. For example, the flaming mountain in front of them, or the huge ship that could travel through the chaotic space currents. It was just that they didn't have the confidence to do so. Until today, when the Western Wastelands and that other race started to make their move, these old bones finally made their move. Whether it was the Western Wastelands or that other race, although they were strong, their threat to them was limited. If they couldn't reach the sovereign realm, what was the point of living? The two Western Wastelands' true sages who were called out stiffened. Under the watchful eyes of so many people, if the two of them retreated without fighting, even if it was because the person who came was strong and they couldn't fight against him, it wouldn't make sense. Zhou Yin, that bastard, wasn't here. His luck was really good. Every time there was trouble, no one knew where he would hide. Gritting their teeth, the two of them took a step forward. With a low roar, a strong force burst out of their bodies. Courting death, one of the old monsters from the broken world said expressionlessly. He raised his hand and pressed forward heavily. The space suddenly collapsed inwards like a huge mouth trying to swallow the two Western Wastelands' true sages. To him, fighting one against two seemed to be a very easy thing to do. Do it! Suppress Liijo. Don't give him a chance to escape. Seal the space. The other two true sages from the broken world coordinated perfectly with each other in an instant. A strong force descended and sealed the entire space. Liijo seemed to have sunk into a swamp, and his face was filled with fear. This group of old undyings were too strong, and their methods were extremely sharp. Once they made their move, they wouldn't give him any chance. Just as he was about to be taken away, the swamp-like space around him was suddenly torn apart by a strong force. A low roar sounded like thunder. "With me here, no one will be able to hurt your highness." Every word was spoken loudly and clearly. Li Ijo was about to cry. His figure flashed behind him, and he said, "I knew it. I knew it. Sage, you wouldn't ignore me." Sage Zhou Yin righteously said, "I've caused your highness to be startled. Previously, I was hiding to the side to protect your highness so that you wouldn't be injured by a sneak attack. I didn't think that it would be 3 broken world experts that came." At the same time, another soft voice sounded in Li Ijo's ears. "Your highness, the broken world ancient true sages are working together with that race to obtain the item within the undying flame. That is why they attacked you and tried to obtain the key to Western Wasteland's ship. If your highness trusts me, then give me the key. I swear that I will protect it with my life. At that time, these people won't continue to chase after your highness. Otherwise, if you face the combined attacks of 3 broken world ancient true sages, I am not confident that I can protect your highness." Li Ijo's eyes were brimming with tears. If it wasn't for the fact that the situation wasn't right, he would have hugged Qin Yu and cried loudly to vent the emotions in his heart. Sage Zhou Yin is truly my most loyal person. In such a situation, he didn't care about his own safety to ensure my safety. I, Li Ijo, vow that as long as I can survive this trial, I will repay Sage Zhou Yin 10 times, 100 times over. With a deep breath, Li Ijo flipped his hand and took out an item. He said, "Sage Zhou Yin, this is the most precious treasure to open the ship. I will give it to you. No matter what, I will not allow any mishaps." Sage Zhou Yin bowed. "I will not disappoint you." He received the key with both hands and turned to leave. He laughed. 3 broken world true sages. If you want the key, then come and find me." Some things were difficult to fake. For instance, the key to open the ship. The moment Li Ijo took it out, the 3 ancient true sages knew that the key was real. And the reason they attacked Li Ijo was because they wanted to obtain this key. They naturally wouldn't watch helplessly as it was taken away. "You can't escape. Hand over the key." With angry roars, the 2 ancient true sages chased after him. 327 finally understood why the rogue cultivators of the broken world decided to work together and why they were able to detect Western Huang's plot. It turned out that the old undyings of the broken world had been eyeing this place ever since they were defeated. It was possible that they had already obtained a lot of information before they realized it. Forget it. With the help of these ancient true sages, Li Ijo would be in trouble. This was definitely a good thing for his race. It could even turn the tables. No. Even if they caught Li Ijo and obtained half of the key from Western Huang, they wouldn't be able to open the ship, unless these ancient true sages had the confidence to obtain the other half of the key. 327's heart shrank. He stomped heavily on the ground, and his figure retreated. The moment he retreated, the space where he was originally at suddenly collapsed, forming a terrifying black hole. To be able to create such a scene in the Zeroth world, the strength of the person who did it was enough to make one's heart palpitate. A low voice could be heard from the black hole. "You are indeed the chosen young master of that race. You are indeed sharp and responsive. However, you can't escape. Hand over the key, and I can spare your life today." 327's eyes were gloomy, and his heart was filled with fear. If he didn't have a certain race treasure on him that could strengthen his senses, he might not have been able to escape. Rogue cultivators of the broken world. He gritted his teeth and roared. 327's face was green. It wasn't only because the other party dared to attack him. More importantly, the other party had been lying to him from the start. What cooperation! It was obvious that the other party wanted to take advantage of the situation. While the race was fighting with Western Huang, they wanted to snatch the key. What good plan! Stop the war with Western Huang and work together to deal with the rogue cultivators? This idea first appeared in his mind, but was quickly suppressed. The rogue cultivators' evil intentions were real. However, Western Huang's plan was also real. With the rogue cultivators messing up the situation, it might not be a bad thing for that race. Of course, The reason 327 dared to think this was because he had absolute confidence that his own safety wouldn't be a problem. If so, he might as well delay for a moment and borrow the strength of these broken world ancient true saints to weaken Westerhuang's strength and disrupt their plans. From the black hole, another hoarse voice sounded out. Why waste time talking to him? Let's attack now. Okay. Bang. The black hole suddenly exploded. Terrifying cracks spread out in all directions like a black spiderweb. What vanished along with it were the auras of the two broken world ancient true saints that were hiding within. 327's complexion changed once more. He punched out. A formidable strength erupted, roaring out like a broken dam. Dong! As if he had struck some incomparably massive leather bag, a low and deep sound spread out, causing trembling ripples to spread out. 327 borrowed the force to retreat. Wherever he went, space cracked apart. At the same time, the flesh and blood on his body also began to crack apart. The scarlet cracks were like the open mouths of children, and it was frightening to look at them. Protect the young master. With angry roars, the powerhouses of that race swarmed forwards. Chapter 1379. The process of obtaining the first key was smoother than expected. Chinyu revealed a smile. He really had to thank the three ancient true sages who chased after him. If they hadn't acted and forcefully Ijo into a desperate situation, Chinyu wouldn't have been able to obtain the key so easily. Of course, gratitude was just gratitude. Chinyu didn't have the mood or time to waste on these three ancient true sages. There was a commotion at the location of that race. As expected, there were other old monsters who had acted. To Chinyu, this was good news. Perhaps he could easily collect all the keys. He couldn't miss this chance. You three, I will leave first. I won't keep you company. Laughing, Chinyu's speed suddenly increased. You want to leave? Not so easy. Stay here for me. Chase. A moment later, the three ancient true sages stopped in their tracks. Their faces were ashen. In front of them was the battlefield between the Western Wilderness and that race. However, no matter how hard they tried, they could not find the aura of Sage Zhouyin. He was like a shadow that disappeared into thin air. Damn it! The three of them had joined hands, and yet this person had escaped. If they couldn't obtain the key from Western Desolation, then all their efforts would have been in vain. Not only were the three ancient true sages furious, Chinyu, who had just escaped, was already on his way back. Soon, the figure of Clan 327 appeared in his line of sight. The surrounding space continued to shatter. Numerous terrifying black holes, like gaping mouths, continuously attempted to tear apart the seal and swallow 327. The ancient true sage who attacked that race clearly had deep attainments in the Tao of space. Even though the race's experts were protecting 327, they were still injured. Most of them had cracks on their bodies, and their faces were pale white. This was good. If 327 was safe, then Chinyu wouldn't have a chance to appear. What was even more perfect was that he didn't see 418 around. That's right, Chinyu was the most familiar with him. Moreover, this person had a close relationship with 327. He was the best choice. The opportunity was right in front of him, and it might disappear in an instant. Therefore, he had to act now. Chinyu moved. He instantly turned into 418 and flew over from afar. With a dark expression, he said, "Rogue cultivators of broken world, if you dare to touch my race's young master, you will pay a heavy price." 327 frowned. "Why are you here?" Chinyu was startled. He swept his eyes over Chinyu's face and didn't notice anything wrong. Only then did he feel a little more at ease. He said, "Sir's safety cannot be compromised. I will follow you." 327 replied, "Don't worry, I'm fine." His tone was indeed very confident. Could it be that the clan still had a trump card? But since he had already made his move, there was no reason for him to give up halfway. Chinyu took a deep breath and cupped his hands together. "Sir, the Broken World Wandering Cultivators have already planned this, and they will not give up so easily. Your safety is too important. so please hand over the key to me. Don't worry, young master. As long as I'm alive, the key won't have any problems. Opposite him, 327 frowned. You want to take the key away? Just like how sage Zhou Yin lured the broken world, ancient true sage away? Qingyu nodded. Yes. Just as he finished speaking, his heart skipped a beat. Without any time to think about anything else, Qingyu stomped his feet and drew backwards. In the next moment, the space around him violently shook. It was like a giant, invisible hand had grasped it, twisting it into a dough twist. Not good. He had been discovered. Qingyu took a deep breath and made one final effort. With a panicked expression, he angrily said, "Sir, what is the meaning of this?" The surrounding cultivators were also stunned. They clearly didn't think that 327 would attack 418. After all, the latter had always been 327's most loyal supporter, and the two had a close relationship. 327 had no intention of explaining. His icy cold eyes locked on Qingyu, and he pointed a finger. He isn't 418. Capture him. The moment his voice fell, before that cultivator could react, Qingyu leapt forwards, his hand smashing outwards. His plan to copy the other key had failed. Since he couldn't deceive them, he could only take them by force. As for the other key, Qingyu was determined to obtain it. 327 lifted a hand and punched out. In the blink of an eye, their fists collided. His complexion changed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood, his eyes stubbornly staring at Qingyu. "It's you." The moment they collided, he could clearly feel the formidable killing might of Qingyu's strength aimed at that clan. Like an icy cold blade, it instantly tore through his flesh and blood. It sank into his marrow, stirring up a wave of pain that caused his soul to shiver. This wasn't just because of the intense pain, but also because of fear, and the urge to destroy. Without any reason at all, a thought suddenly appeared in 327's heart. This person in front of him had to die, otherwise he would become a great calamity to his clan. Before, it was said that the reason why 327 didn't fear the encirclement of the ancient true saints of the broken world, and even wanted to borrow their strength to heavily wound the western wilds and regain the initiative, was because he still had a hidden card in his hand. Now, after discovering that Qingyu was the murderer that killed so many of his clansmen, 327 activated it without hesitation. 2 elders kill him. He thought of suppressing and capturing Qingyu alive to find out just what secrets he was hiding on Qinyu's body that could cause such fatal damage to that clan. But this thought only appeared for a moment before he suppressed it. His intuition told him that killing Qingyu was the best choice. Bang, bang. Terrifying fluctuations of strength erupted from 327's body. 2 beams of light shot out from his body, instantly turning into 2 human figures. Although they were blurry and illusory, these 2 figures of light released a horrifying aura that left one's heart racing. This was the strength of a true peak saint. It didn't avoid the damage brought about by the world's arrows, and was even stronger than the ancient true saints that attacked. Qingyu sighed inwardly. He knew that the chances of him snatching it were already minuscule. Although these were only 2 projections in front of him, their strength was tyrannical. There was no meaning in staying here any longer. There was even a chance that he would be entangled by them and fall into danger. Without any hesitation, Qingyu turned and left. His speed instantly erupted to the limit as he hurtled towards the chaotic battlefield. 327 screamed, "Elders, we cannot let this person go." Whoosh, whoosh, light howled as it chased after him. But for Qingyu, who had grasped the ability to freely change his figure and aura, wanting to escape from this sort of rotten porridge battlefield was a simple matter. 2 figures of light floated high in the air. Although their faces were blurry, one could still feel their anger and gloominess. Right under their noses, their opponent had actually escaped. Qingyu shuttled through the battlefield, his eyes flickering. It was clear his thoughts were rapidly turning. The first question was, how could 327 be so sure that he wasn't 418? If it was said that he had seen through his aura, Qingyu wouldn't believe it. His transformation technique, when combined with the strength of his pre-celestial spirit, had reached a nearly flawless degree. Even a true saint wouldn't be able to sense him. The only possibility was that 327 had some sort of formidable treasure on him that could lock onto the flaws in Qin Yu's aura. But that wasn't right either. If there really was such a treasure, then he should have discovered it when Qin Yu first appeared. Why would he wait a moment before attacking? If he could deny this, then that meant that Qin Yu had exposed himself when he spoke. Thinking back to his conversation with 327, as well as the time when he suddenly attacked, was after he confirmed that he wanted to take away the key. A sharp light exploded in Qin Yu's eyes. For 18, the other half of the key to open the ship was on his body. No wonder 327 had immediately turned hostile when Qin Yu asked for the key. If so, then everything could be explained. Shua. Qin Yu shot into the skies, his eyes sweeping over the entire battlefield. This was because the most important thing right now was to find 418's position. As Qin Yu soared into the skies and searched for 418, the projections of the two clan elders helplessly flew back into 327's body. The amount of time they could maintain was limited. They had already wasted nearly half of their time just now, so they naturally couldn't stay outside any longer. And what was even more hateful was that after wasting so much precious time, it was actually useless. They could only watch helplessly on as Qin Yu escaped. 327's face darkened. Anger and alarm interweaved in his eyes. Because Qin Yu had been exposed, he suddenly felt that things had become strange. When the clan had sent a message, it had clearly been said that the one who had done all of this was the Western Wilderness. But in the current situation, Li Ezhou had been badly battered by the broken world's ancient true saint. So how could he still be in the mood to attack him? Ha! He suddenly lifted a hand and slapped his forehead. Where's 418? Immediately find him and bring him back. On that day, Qin Yu had brought Yao Tao, Ling Xiao, and the others to find that clan and express their willingness to cooperate. Not long ago, 327 had personally handed the key to 418. This matter was an absolute secret that only the two of them knew about. So, Qin Yu's guess wasn't wrong. The reason that 327 could determine that he was a fake was because of this. If the two clan elders weren't able to kill Qin Yu, then he might have figured out the twists and turns involved. In other words, 418 was in a very dangerous situation right now. The Western Wilderness and that clan were in a great battle. In addition to that group of broken world's ancient true saints, countless powerful auras wove together, forming a distorted force field. Within this range, all communication methods were temporarily blocked. Even if they managed to send a message, it would become incomplete. 327 tried several times to contact 418 through the clan's communication device, but he didn't receive a response. His complexion became even uglier. Go find 418, we must find him. Bang! With a loud explosion, the Western Wilderness cultivator revealed a look of unwillingness. With a large hole in his chest, his corpse slumped to the ground. 418 gasped for breath, a trace of fear on his face. This person had actually been hiding his strength. The two of them had been evenly matched. If it weren't for the other party revealing a trace of fear and hesitation at the critical moment, then the one to fall to the ground right now might have been him. He swept his eyes around. Because of the continuous battles just now, they had left the main battlefield and arrived at the edge. There wasn't any danger here. After confirming this, 418 took out the clan's communication device. It had been trembling just now, as if someone were looking for him. As he probed it with his divine sense, 418 was given a fright. There were many messages, and most of them were in an incomplete state. He hurriedly skimmed through them and roughly understood what had happened. A mysterious cultivator had impersonated him to attack 327, impersonating him to deal with 327. 418's complexion darkened. Without any time to think, he turned and rushed back to the battlefield. Although this matter didn't have anything to do with him, he still had to explain everything as soon as possible. Moreover, The messages were incomplete, and he was worried about 327's condition. "So, you were here." A voice entered his ears. For 18 came to a sudden stop. He swept his eyes around, and a look of vigilance appeared on his face. 327, why are you here? The aura he sensed wasn't wrong. It was indeed 327, but for some reason, he felt that something was wrong. 327 took a deep breath and coldly said, "Just now, a cultivator disguised himself as you and attacked me. His aura imitation ability is extremely strong. If it weren't for my sharp senses, I would have been deceived. Where's the key? You must hide it well. The broken world ancient true saint has attacked, and his goal is to steal the key." Only he and 327 knew of this matter. 418 relaxed. He nodded. "Don't worry, I will keep it safe." Bang. Before he finished speaking, 327 suddenly attacked. The timing he chose was just right. It was the moment 418 relaxed his guard. Wild strength surged out like a tide, instantly wrapping around him. 418's eyes widened, and he spat out blood from his nose and mouth, a look of horror on his face. "You aren't 327. Chinyu punched out. Without hesitation, he stepped forwards and instantly chased after him. He lifted his hand and grasped out. "Stop!" An enraged roar came from behind him. The real 327 had arrived. At this time, his eyes were wide with anger, as if he wanted to cut Chinyu to pieces. "Kacha!" 418's neck instantly shattered. The light in his wide eyes rapidly faded away. In the next moment, his corpse exploded. Blood howled in all directions and gathered together. Another key appeared. Chinyu grabbed it and turned his head, his icy cold eyes glancing at 327 and the others that were rushing towards him. Then, he stepped forwards and rapidly flew away. Behind him, after 418 was killed, the sphere of blood that he had just condensed exploded with a loud bang. A massive amount of blood fog evaporated, revealing 418's pained and twisted face. It's him. 418 roared with all his might. Then, the blood sphere condensed and exploded again. After repeating this process 3 times, there was less than a third of the blood left, and it smoothly vanished into the void. 327 looked at the place where the blood vanished, sorrow rising in his eyes. This was because he knew that without accident, he would have lost this friend forever. 418 wouldn't die. He would be resurrected in the spring of rebirth. But at that time, the 418 that would return would only be a code name to him. Don't worry, I know it's him and I've remembered his aura. For 18, my friend, I promise you that I will find him and kill him, no matter how long it takes, no matter what price I have to pay. 327 spoke in a low voice. The sorrow and pain on his face were all covered up by an icy, cold, killing intent. He looked up at the 2 small world fragments, at the large ship that was quietly parked. No matter who this person was, after obtaining the key, he would definitely go to where the ship was. So, as long as he waited there, he would absolutely be able to find him. The projections of the 2 tribal elders could at least support one more attack. In addition to the tribe's secret source gathering technique, as long as this person appeared, there would be no way he could escape. Kill him. He had to kill him. Chapter 1380. To Chinyu, killing people wasn't a burden at all, much less killing someone from that clan. Thus, 327's hateful eyes and nearly tangible killing intent didn't affect Chinyu in the slightest. This was because he firmly believed that there was a great hatred between the 2 sides. Only when one side perished would the hatred end. Although there were some accidents, the process of obtaining the 2 keys was still considered smooth. The only thing that wasn't appropriate was that compared to his original plan of waiting for the harvest, Western Desolation and that clan hadn't used all their cards yet. If he wanted to smoothly open the ship, there would definitely be a great deal of trouble. This was a simple truth. The Western Desolation and that clan that had lost their keys would soon lock their focus onto the ship that had been soaked in blood sacrifices and was filled with the pungent smell of blood. Thus, taking the keys and borrowing the opportunity of the broken world, ancient true sage to attack. Chinyu could be considered to have opened up a simple method. But after that, boarding the ship was added back. Perhaps everything in the world was like this. There was a balance between gains and losses. Chinyu wasn't in the mood to think about these philosophical questions. Or, even if he had the time, he wouldn't think about them. It was far too taxing on his brain. But whether he thought about it or not, the situation was the same. He still had to face the difficult problem of how to smoothly open the ship. But soon, Chinyu discovered that he didn't need to solve this problem himself. This was because the broken world, ancient true sages that had already played the good guy once had turned around and delivered themselves to his doorstep. Of course, if he wanted to use them, he needed to have sufficient strength. Otherwise, they could crush him with a single finger. He simply didn't have the qualifications to negotiate conditions with them. Your methods are truly excellent. You easily played with Western Desolation and that clan in the palm of your hand. I am filled with admiration. A calm and gentle voice suddenly sounded out in Chinyu's ears. His expression was calm as he said, "The Saint's concealment ability is also very strong. You nearly managed to deceive me. Moreover, I am also curious. How did the Saint lock on my aura?" Space in front of him gently rippled like water. A black-haired, black-robed, middle-aged cultivator walked out. His face was like jade, and his skin was fair and clear. But his eyes seemed to have been baptized by the vicissitudes of time, and they emitted a rich aura of time. Cupping his hands together, the black-haired, black-robed man smiled and said, "I am seamless. I just happen to be able to recognize people through some underhanded means." Ever since Chinyu cultivated his body of rules and used the power of his pre-celestial spirit to display his body transformation, this was the first time someone had seen through his disguise. To say that it was some underhanded trick was clearly a load of bullshit, and an unbearably stinky one at that. Chinyu swept his eyes over the person who came and went straight to the point. "The Seamless Saint can call me Virtuous Nine Lives. For you to stop me now, could it be that you want to seize the key in my hand?" Seamless shook his head. "I did have this thought before, but after seeing Sir Virtuous Jioshing, I realized that this wasn't appropriate." He said with a straight face, "Here, I apologize to Sir Sage Jioshing first. It was really rude of us to have rashly interfered." Chinyu had no expression. "It's fine. Rather, I must thank everyone for their help. Only then was I able to smoothly obtain the key." This was the truth, but it was clearly very rude to say it out loud, and it was also very disrespectful. But this was precisely Chinyu's attitude, extremely domineering. This bunch of old bastards didn't even go out and ask around. How many true sages have I hammered to death? For you to dare to pick my peaches and still be alive and kicking, consider yourself lucky. The Seamless Saint wasn't angered. This was the reality of the world. If you had the strength, you could do whatever you wanted. He smiled and calmly said, "Sir Virtuous Jioshing, the reason I came here today is because I hope to cooperate with you and board that ship together." Chinyu's eyebrows rose up. "On what basis?" The Seamless Saint said, "Because if we don't agree, even if you obtain the key, you will not be able to smoothly board the ship. I believe that Sir Virtuous Jioshing is well aware that I am not exaggerating. Since I said it, I will definitely be able to do it." Chinyu fell silent. But the truth was, he didn't need to remain silent at all. This was because before the Seamless Saint even spoke, he had already guessed this. The basis of cooperation was nothing more than enticement and threats. If there was nothing that could entice Chinyu, then it could only be threats. In this current situation, was there even a need to think about what the ancient true sages of the broken world would do? However, when it was time to remain silent, he still had to remain silent. At the very least, he had to show that he was in a difficult position and then take a step back. Chinyu, who had the strength of a best actor, naturally had no problems displaying such emotions. His slightly furrowed brows and his slightly gloomy expression showed that he was currently in a bad mood and that he was struggling with his emotions. The Seamless Saint wasn't anxious. He smiled and waited. As long as one wasn't a fool, they would make the right choice. As someone who saw everything, the Seamless Saint naturally knew that this Virtuous Jioshing in front of him wasn't a fool. Indeed, after a few breaths of time, he took a deep breath and said, "All right, I agree to bring everyone on board. However, I will provide the key. As for how to board the ship, I will leave it to you to decide." This was Qin Yu's decision. Firstly, as the Seamless Saint said, it was basically impossible to avoid them and board the ship alone. Rather than starting a war because of this, he might as well temporarily cooperate with them. At the same time, he could borrow the strength of these ancient true sages to deal with Western desolation and that race. The Seamless Saint narrowed his eyes, and the smile on his face faded. "Virtuous Jiusheng, you should know that this isn't a simple matter." Qin Yu said, "I have done far more to obtain the key than you have. This is my only condition. If you don't agree, the Seamless Saint can try to take the key from my hands." Cold and hard to the extreme. Of course, the reason he dared to do this was because he had absolute confidence in his own strength. So what if they were ancient true sages that had secluded themselves from the world? In the Zeroth world, no matter how strong they were, there would definitely be restrictions. With Qin Yu's current strength, there was no need for him to fear them. If they truly turned hostile, he might not be able to destroy a group of ancient true sages. But if he could just escape, Qin Yu had complete confidence. The Seamless Saint was silent. He could feel Qin Yu's determination. After several breaths of time, he slowly nodded. "All right, I agree to this." He lifted his hand, and light rapidly surged in his palm, weaving together to form a strange rune. His eyes fell on Qin Yu. The Seamless Saint's eyes flashed. He said, "In order to ensure that our cooperation goes smoothly and that no accidents occur, I ask that Virtuous Jiusheng sign this." The stone pagoda's voice sounded out in Qin Yu's mind. "Contract seal. I never thought that in this era, there would still be someone who understands this. This Seamless Saint is truly an old monster that has lived for many years." He was probing master. He played a little trick in the process of condensing the contract seal, and I just happened to have some research on this. A thought fluctuation spread into Qin Yu's mind. After several breaths of time, Qin Yu's lips curved up. "Does the Seamless Saint think I am ignorant? There is a problem with your contract seal. If you don't fix it, I won't sign it." The Seamless Saint laughed. He cupped his hands together and bowed. "It was just a little test. After all, Virtuous Jiusheng is far too unfamiliar to us." His smile was carefree and natural, without the slightest bit of awkwardness from being seen through. Disregarding everything else, just the thickness of his skin was something that needed to be tempered over time. He lifted his hand and lightly touched the contract seal. It trembled slightly, and there were some subtle changes within the intertwining lines. The stone pagoda said, "Ha! This Seamless Saint is not honest. He did change it, but he mixed in some sand. But it doesn't matter. Since he wants to play tricks, we will accompany him. When Master signs the contract, we will use the blood contract method. I can add a little trick inside. When he wants to do something, he will discover that he is in big trouble." Qin Yu didn't doubt the stone pagoda's judgment. After a moment of hesitation, he flicked his finger. A drop of blood flew out and fell into the contract seal. It was instantly absorbed. "Blood contract." The Seamless Saint frowned and immediately said, "Since Virtuous Jiusheng is so sincere, I naturally cannot disappoint you." He flicked out a drop of blood as well. The moment it fused into the contract seal, the contract burst into a blood flame with a hum. It instantly burned away and disappeared. An invisible contract force descended, connecting the two together. There wasn't much to explain. It was mostly about cooperation and not harming each other. Otherwise, what would happen? The Seamless Saint cupped his hands together. "Virtuous Jiusheng, please wait for a moment. We need to make some preparations." After a slight pause, he smiled and said, "If there is someone you care about here, please inform them to leave as soon as possible, lest we accidentally injure them." Qin Yu raised his eyebrows and said, "Sure." The Seamless Saint smiled and didn't stay any longer. He turned around and left. His figure flashed and disappeared into nothingness. After confirming that the Seamless Saint had really left, Qin Yu flipped his hand and took out a jade slip. His divine sense moved and imprinted the information within. After several breaths, The jade slip gently vibrated and received the feedback from the other party. Pa! His 5 fingers forcefully crushed the jade slip. Qingyu took a step forward, and his figure whizzed away. A moment later, after leaving the battlefield, he found Yao Tao, Ling Xiao, and the others waiting here. "Greetings, Mr. Ninth." The 4 bowed and revealed a worried look. Qingyu could roughly guess what they were thinking. He said, "Everything went smoothly. I have already obtained what I wanted." Ling Xiao, Xianji, Zhou Lei, and Ruan Jing immediately smiled. At the same time, they sighed inwardly. Mr. Ninth was as sharp as ever. An ancient true saint who had secluded himself from the world had intervened and instantly thrown the situation into chaos. Even so, he hadn't been able to disrupt his plans. Looking at the 4 smiling faces in front of him, Qingyu flipped his hand and took out the Netherworld Saint's great Tao fragment. He lifted his hand and divided it into 4 parts. "The plan has been completed. I'm a man of my word. This is your reward." In truth, even though they had guessed this, when Qingyu really took out the great Tao fragment, Ling Xiao and the others were a bit embarrassed. This was because they felt that they hadn't done anything at all and that the entire plan had been arranged by Qingyu. They felt that they were just unimportant extras, so this reward was far too great. But even though they felt embarrassed, it was impossible for them to refuse. This was because they couldn't suppress the ecstasy and excitement that came from their hearts. A true Saint Great Tao fragment was not some random cabbage that could be found on the side of the road. If they missed it today, they feared they would never be able to obtain it again. Glancing around, the 4 people respectfully bowed. "Thank you, Mr. Ninth." The great Tao fragment entered their hands. After feeling its aura, even the calm and tranquil sword cultivators flushed red with excitement. No one knew who took it. At this time, it was impossible for them to calm down. In fact, the 4 of them even wished they could immediately go into seclusion to cultivate. Qingyu said, "What happens next is not something you have the qualifications to participate in. There's a high chance that danger will descend. So, put away your things. My advice to you is to immediately leave. Of course, if you insist on staying, I won't stop you." Ling Xiao and the others didn't doubt Qingyu's judgment at all. Since he said there was a high chance of danger, then it would surely be horrifying. As for whether or not this was a lie that Qingyu had deliberately made up to scare them away, so that others wouldn't divide up their harvests, haha, was there such a need? Ling Xiao was the first to bow. "Thank you for Mr. Ninth's reminder. I have come out to adventure for a long time, so I will directly withdraw from World Zeroth." Xianji, Zhou Lei, and Ruan Jing nodded together. "Yes, we have also decided to leave." They were well aware that the true struggle for good fortune in World Zeroth had yet to begin. But, looking at the participants, there was the Dark World and the mysterious races, as well as Qingyu and the many ancient true saints that had secluded themselves from the world. If they joined this lineup, it would be the same as seeking death. It was important to know one's own limits. But Yao Tao didn't. She stared at Qingyu and said, "I won't leave." With just these words, her attitude was extremely firm. Chapter 1381. In the end, Qingyu wasn't able to break away from Yao Tao. He watched as Ling Xiao, Xianji, Zhou Lei, and Ruan Jing left. Then, he turned and said, "Yao Tao, you should already know who I am, just as I know who you are." Yao Tao smiled. "So you must be confused. Why do I continue to stay? Or perhaps I should say that I'm shamelessly sticking to you." Qingyu remained silent. Facing this face, it was difficult for him to say anything too excessive. But his silence was enough to show his inner attitude. Ever since they met, besides the 3 strikes at the start, Yao Tao had appeared friendly and harmless. But Qingyu still couldn't trust her. Yao Tao frowned in dissatisfaction. "You really have nothing to fear from being favored. Qingyu, you are going too far." But this expression only lasted for a short moment before she couldn't help but smile. "But there's nothing I can do. Who told me to take a fancy to you? Once I set my mind on something, I won't give up so easily." Then she winked at Qingyu. Look carefully. I look exactly like Peach Girl. It's not just my appearance, but every other part of my body is the same. If you don't believe me, you can touch me. Qin Yu was startled by her sudden movement and hurriedly took a step back. With a sullen face, he growled, "Damn it! This crazy woman was really capable of doing anything she wanted to say." Yao Tao blinked. "Are you not satisfied with the touch? Do you want more?" "In truth, I don't mind, but in this situation, it doesn't seem appropriate." "What fucking inappropriate?" Qin Yu clenched his teeth and turned to walk away. He could clearly see that Yao Tao was sticking to him no matter what. She was shamelessly sticking to him. The reason? Love at first sight was something that could be seen in the script. Taking a step back, even if such a thing did happen, it would never happen to Yao Tao. Although many things weren't explicitly stated, Qin Yu was well aware that Yao Tao had been able to perfectly conceal herself for so many years. This was enough to prove her wisdom and forbearance. Otherwise, did she really think that the Peach Garden and the Peach Garden Master were just decorations? Would she allow a soul seed avatar to grow to this point? Ignoring everything else for now, in Qin Yu's opinion, it was impossible for Yao Tao, who possessed such wisdom and forbearance, to be a woman who would shamelessly throw herself at him because of love at first sight. There was definitely a problem here. It was just that Qin Yu didn't know what it was. "Wait for me." Yao Tao smiled and followed. As she looked at Qin Yu's back, a trace of appreciation flashed deep in her eyes. What a smart man. From the beginning until now, he had been probing. Perhaps he had already sensed something. Sometimes, dealing with smart people was very comfortable, but most of the time, it was not very comfortable. However, there was no other way. Who told him to choose him? He couldn't shake her off, and it wasn't the right time to fall out with her. He could only try to ignore her as much as possible. Fortunately, this woman had some self-awareness. She probably knew that she was not welcomed, so she kept quiet. Qin Yu was waiting for the Seamless Saint to send a message through the contract seal. At the same time, he was also a bit curious as to what methods this group of ancient true saints used to suppress the Western desolation and that race and smoothly board the ship. Perhaps it was because he was already prepared, but this wait didn't last for too long. The contract seal trembled, and Qin Yu received the message. The Seamless Saint's message was very simple. He gave Qin Yu a set of spatial coordinates and asked him to come to this place to avoid being implicated. In addition, the Seamless Saint had reminded Qin Yu to have Ling Xiao and the others leave ahead of time. It seemed that this was a group suppression. Could it be that these old monsters wanted to directly crush the Western desolation and that race? One didn't need to be a genius to know that this was an incomparably difficult matter. Although this group of ancient true saints had displayed an extraordinarily strong strength, Qin Yu still didn't think much of it. However, since they wanted to attack, Qin Yu wouldn't stop them. It would be best if they succeeded. Otherwise, if both sides were wounded, the result wouldn't be unacceptable. Shua. Qin Yu's figure flashed, and he howled into the distance. Behind him, Yao Tao followed without a word. Facing his indifferent and rude attitude, she still maintained a smile on her face. She didn't reveal the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. The corners of his lips twitched. He secretly thought that this woman's tenacity was truly good. But the more she was like this, the more it showed that she was plotting something big. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a woman in this world that would mistreat herself like this. He wouldn't accept any arguments against this. The corresponding spatial coordinates weren't too far away, and they soon arrived. Although he was confident in his own strength, that didn't mean he could be negligent. Things like capsizing in a ditch were a common occurrence. Moreover, in Qin Yu's opinion, if several ancient true saints joined forces, they would be like a raging river, far more fierce than a ditch. Qin Yu stopped in the distance. As he sensed with rapt attention, he didn't forget to call out to the stone pagoda. After all, he was facing a group of old monsters. Who knew whether or not they had some ancient tricks up their sleeves? When they were signing the contract, the Seamless Saint had already shown off his little tricks. If it weren't for the stone pagoda helping him, he might have already been tricked. But this time, there wasn't anything wrong. After carefully confirming and communicating with the stone pagoda, Qin Yu flew in. Yao Tao's low laughter echoed out from behind him. Although this woman didn't speak, the meaning behind her laughter was clear. "Little brother, you've lived quite cautiously." Qin Yu's face darkened. He forced himself to ignore her. He still didn't know what Yao Tao's true personality was like, but looking at her current performance, it wasn't too much to say that she was someone who took advantage of others. Before he could figure out how to deal with her, he could only coldly deal with the atmosphere between them. Qin Yu didn't speak. Yao Tao's lips curved up. She didn't continue teasing him, instead quietly standing to the side. Faint traces of fragrance entered his nose and mouth. Qin Yu had noticed this fragrance before, but he had never breathed it in so clearly before. It came from Yao Tao's body. Although the smell wasn't too strong, there was a bit of lingering charm to it that was able to stir Qin Yu's mind. For instance, right now, he wanted to close his breathing, but he could faintly feel a sense of peace and joy in his heart. Qin Yu had to admit that he liked the smell of Yao Tao's body. This wasn't some method of seduction. Qin Yu was sure of this. It was like this woman, Yao Tao, was born to be in tune with him. This was an extremely dangerous thought. Qin Yu's mind remained calm and clear. At the same time, he also felt a bit of worry, because a similar feeling also existed in Peach Girl's body. Was it because they were completely the same as Ningling? Or was it because the main body and avatar belonged to the same body to begin with, so they shared some common attribute? Thus, even though his mind was clear that they were three different people, his body still instinctively felt a sense of closeness. Qin Yu closed his breathing, isolating himself from the fragrance. He closed his eyes, trying to calm his thoughts as he thought about what would happen next. Behind him, Yao Tao seemed to sense something. The corners of her lips curved up, and a smile appeared in her eyes. In truth, the relationship between the main body and avatar was far closer than anyone knew. This was especially true when she became powerful to a certain degree and obtained a high degree of freedom. At that time, the boundaries between the two had already begun to blur. Then, why couldn't the position of the avatar and main body be swapped? She had been working hard towards this goal until she reached a bottleneck not too long ago. It seemed that she had reached the end of her path by relying on her own strength. Thus, when Yao Tao appeared in the world for the first time, she no longer concealed her existence. Firstly, it was because Peach Girl's condition made her very uneasy. Secondly, it was meaningless to continue hiding her growth. The Yardmaster's resolute attitude, coupled with her own condition, made Yao Tao choose to retreat temporarily. However, after seeing Qin Yu, she had a new discovery. Yao Tao wasn't too clear about the specific reason, but her strong intuition told her that Qin Yu had some kind of power that could help her break through the bottleneck. She had to admit that this was the main reason why she displayed her shameless side and wanted to stick to Qin Yu no matter what. Of course, Qin Yu was outstanding enough to suit her taste, and so on. These were also extremely important supporting factors. Yao Tao definitely wouldn't let go of such a Qin Yu. Qin Yu calmed his mind and focused on the present. Peach Girl noticed that he was holding his breath, and his mood became better. The broken world, the few ancient true sages finally took action. However, before they took action, there was a small interlude. Someone raised a different opinion about the seamless sage's decision. If you and I join forces, it won't be difficult to kill a true sage. Isn't the seamless sage's decision a little inappropriate? Today, in the Zeroth world, there were 6 ancient true sages of the broken world. The one who spoke was the one who attacked 327 previously. He had extremely high attainments in the Tao of space, and his strength was the highest among the 6 true sages. It was also because of this that he had the right to question the seamless sage. Of course, another important reason was that the other ancient true sage who cooperated with him to suppress 327 previously was his twin brother. Just as he finished speaking, a low voice sounded again. "My brother is right. True sage, seamless. It would be best if you could explain a little." The other 3 ancient true sages remained silent. Any team with more than 2 people, no matter what their nature was, would definitely have different factions and opinions within it. Seamless, the true sage brothers, and the other 3. The 6 of them were divided into 3 factions. The seamless sage was the loneliest. However, The fact that he could be one of the three factions by himself was enough to prove his strength. After being questioned, he did not get angry. Instead, his tone was calm. Regardless of whether the name Virtuous Joshing is real or not, the only thing that we value is cultivation. Before locking onto this person, I had thought of snatching the key. However, the moment I saw him, I changed my mind. The elder brother frowned, very strong. The seamless sage nodded and then shook his head. Indeed, very strong. If I were to act, I wouldn't have much confidence. However, if it was just that, the six of us would even dare to fight against a ruler descending, let alone suppress someone of the same level. After a pause, he seemed to be preparing his words before continuing. But I don't feel good. Or more accurately, my intuition tells me that if we were to fight against him, we might not be able to gain an advantage. The space instantly quietened down. Since they had joined forces, although they weren't extremely close, they were still relatively clear about each other's strength. The seamless sage's tyrannical cultivation was the key to him being able to act alone. Another reason was that he had cultivated some kind of ancient sacred art. His mental senses were extremely sharp, allowing him to avoid danger in advance. This point had already been proven more than once in the past. Hence, when the seamless sage mentioned this as the reason, no one could ignore it. The three true sages who had been silent all this while opened their mouths. If that's the case, then let's act according to the seamless sage's words. Today's opportunity is rare. Entering the Flaming Mountain is our first priority. Try to avoid any unexpected problems. That's right. I agree with the seamless sage's decision. 2 against 1. The true sage brothers who were proficient in the Tao of space snorted lightly and did not say anything else. The seamless sage did not have the slightest hint of pride after winning. His expression did not change at all. He nodded and said, "Since everyone has agreed, then let's begin." He turned around and was the first to leave. The true sage brothers each chose a nearby position. The remaining 3 ancient true sages naturally took up the other 3 positions. The 6 of them took up 6 different positions. The distance between them was the same. If someone were to stand in the sky and look at everything, they would realize that if they were to connect their positions in a straight line, it would form a standard hexagram. Not long after, the aura of the true sage of the 6 paths erupted without any reservation and blasted into the void, causing the space to tremble violently. Hence, a huge and incomparably dazzling hexagram actually slowly emerged from the trembling space. The area it covered was huge. With the big ship as the center point, it enveloped the 2 small world fragments and a large area around it. The clan that had gathered their strength and wanted to wait at the location of the big ship to find Chinyu and kill him. The Western Wilderness saw that the clan had shrunk and gathered their strength. They vaguely guessed that the other party had lost the key. They cursed silently for being idiots and had no choice but to follow suit. The direct result was that almost everyone from the Little Kings and Little King sides were now within the coverage of the hexagram. Chapter 1382. It's a sacrifice, Yao Tao said in a low voice. The smile on her face disappeared as she stared at the falling hexagram in the distance, shock in her eyes. In truth, she was shocked by the actions of the ancient true saints. They didn't do anything, but when they did, they were ruthless to the extreme. They actually wanted to kill all the cultivators of the Western Desolation and that clan under the hexagram. You could clearly feel the terrifying aura contained within this 6-pointed star. It was like a giant millstone, roaring as it spun at high speeds. Layers of strength tumbled like tides, wanting to destroy everything within. It was hard to imagine just how long these ancient true saints had prepared in order to complete such a horrifying and terrifying arrangement. And more importantly, were they not afraid of the retaliation from the Western Desolation and that clan? You didn't believe that the ancient true saints who had been planning this for a long time didn't know much about the Western Desolation and that clan. If they knew and still dared to do this, then they had no fear at all. But as soon as Chinyu thought of this, he rejected it. Then the other possibility was that the ancient true saints didn't leave any path of retreat for themselves. Simply put, if they didn't succeed, they would either die in the volcano or use this opportunity to soar into the heavens. A sharp light exploded in Qin Yu's eyes. He had even more expectations towards a volcano that was wrapped in the super chaotic space turbulence. The reason was simple. If they didn't have absolute confidence, the ancient true saints wouldn't dare to take such a risk. They must know something, and they must be certain that there was something in the volcano that could change their destiny. As for killing people, Qin Yu didn't have any objections. In fact, he was happy to see it happen. He originally wanted to kill the Western Desolation and that clan, but now he was borrowing the hands of the ancient true saints to accomplish this. However, there was one point that Qin Yu had just realized. Sure enough, everyone was an actor. While you were acting, others were also part of the stage. For instance, when True Saint Seamless agreed to Qin Yu's conditions, it was clear that the ancient true saints had already decided to act against the Western Desolation and that clan. At most, they were just pushing the boat along with the current. This was because if they wanted to start the ship and break through the super chaotic space turbulence to enter the volcano, not only did they need 2 keys, but they also needed a high-quality power to drive it. The cultivators of Shi Huang and that clan who were about to be sacrificed under these stars were clearly the providers of this power. As he thought about the countless lives of the vast young world that had been sacrificed to drive the ship, Qin Yu's last bit of unwillingness to watch the slaughter in front of him dissipated. This was because this was what the Western Wilds and their clan deserved. Yao Tao suppressed her initial shock, and her sharp senses returned. She blinked as she looked at Qin Yu. Through the subtle expressions on his face and the indifference in his eyes, she was able to guess some of his thoughts. Before this, she only knew that Qin Yu was plotting against the Western Wilds and that clan. But now, it seemed that there was a great deal of personal grudges mixed in as well. Could it be useful information? Perhaps he could start from this aspect to break the deadlock between the two of them and make their relationship closer. Beneath the hexagram was a purgatory. It was unknown what kind of price they had paid or what kind of preparations they had made, but the 6 ancient true sages were able to display the power of their peak realms. The hexagram in front of them was actually formed by the great Daos of the 6 true sages. They borrowed the power of the restrictive array to continue and twist together, weaving together. The rules of Zeroth world were broken, and they instinctively countered the great Daos of the true sages. Now that 6 peak true sages had brazenly attacked with the crushing power of their great Daos, it was naturally impossible for them to remain indifferent to this. Thus, at the same time that purgatory descended, the 6 ancient true divinities were also placed in an extremely dangerous environment. The space outside the hexagram constantly shattered. Kacha, kacha, kacha sounds rang out incessantly. It was like a giant mouth of a piranha that wanted to drag them into a school of fish and eat them. But as old monsters that had lived for countless years, since the ancient true sages dared to attack, they naturally had a certain degree of confidence in themselves. At this time, their great Daos resonated with each other. The vibrating power that was produced tumbled within the hexagram, forming a raging, killing power. But there was also a part of it that covered them, resisting the threat from Zeroth world. Disregarding the risk that the 6 ancient true sages had to bear, the combined power of the great Daos that descended from the restrictive array was already a glorious victory. In short, there were miserable wails and cries within the purgatory. Broken limbs could be seen everywhere, and the smell of blood filled the air. The hexagram was a great Daos that were intertwined with the power of the restrictive array. Under the resonance, it was equivalent to simultaneously withstanding the terrifying power of the 6 peak true sages. The cultivators from the West Desolation and that clan were indeed strong, but they were far from being able to resist the combined might of 6 ancient true sages. If that was the case, the cultivators from the West Desolation and that clan who had the undying attribute would have cursed in anger and thought about taking revenge in the future. they wouldn't have been so terrified and naturally wouldn't have been worthy of the name purgatory. No one could escape. To be more precise, everyone who was killed under the hexagram had truly died. That clan had the secret treasure of their clan and was also blessed by the will of the great wilderness, allowing them to be reborn in the spring of rebirth. However, too much of their bloodline had been destroyed. Less than half of the blood that escaped, after awakening, would give birth to an unfamiliar consciousness. This was no different from death. Of course, as cultivators from the desolate region, strictly speaking, they could be considered people from the higher realms. They naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for death. But the methods of the 6 ancient true sages were ruthless to the extreme. They were also meticulous and tyrannical to the extreme. All attempts to break through the hexagram ended in failure. Here, the incomparably formidable strength of the 6 ancient true sages was once again proven. Li Yijo's face paled and his body trembled. If it weren't for the 2 Western Desolation true sages protecting him with their own cultivation, he would have already collapsed. Wong, another shockwave of killing power, swept over. With a puff, Li Yijo spat out a mouthful of blood. He could clearly feel the threat of death. Your Highness, save me. I don't want to die. With a scream, 2 Western Desolation cultivators not too far away exploded into pieces. Like those who had died before, their broken limbs were scattered everywhere. They didn't dissipate into the power of darkness. The stench of blood in the air became thicker. This scene happened not too far away, and it completely crushed Li Yijo's willpower. He had already discovered that the passage to the broken world of the southwest desolate region was temporarily cut off. Of course, he also understood that the strong reinforcements that he had been waiting for would never arrive. Escape. I have to leave this place. If not, he would end up like these people and become a pile of broken bones and rotten flesh. As for how to escape, Li Yijo took a deep breath. His eyes on his pale face were now bloodshot due to the mixture of fear and madness. 2 sages, the situation has completely gone out of control. Western Desolation can no longer hold on. If you and I stay here, only death awaits us. The 2 Western Desolation true sages' faces turned green. Do I need you to remind me of this? This hexagram was extremely strange. Even as a true sage, he wasn't confident that he wouldn't be implicated by the death of his doppelganger. It wouldn't be to the extent of dying. However, once his Tao was damaged, he wouldn't have a future to look forward to. To a cultivator, this outcome was at most 30% lighter than death. However, at this moment, Li Yijo wasn't in the mood to waste time talking nonsense. His eyes landed on him as he waited for him to continue. No matter what the reason for this defeat is, you and I will have to bear the responsibility. Therefore, regardless of whether you are willing to accept it or not, the 2 true sages and I are bound together. This was the truth. Time was tight. Li Yijo didn't know how many more attacks of the hexagram could he survive. Without any hesitation, he continued. Therefore, the 2 sages can only stand together with me and push the responsibility to Li Siji and his clan. This is why the rogue cultivators of the broken world benefited from this and led to this outcome. The 2 Western Desolation true sages' faces turned even uglier. If they knew that they would encounter such a situation when they descended into the broken world, they would rather offend the previous Desolation Emperor and reject without hesitation. However, now that things had come to this, there was no point in saying all this. Li Yijo was right. This unprecedented defeat could lead to immeasurable consequences. Even a sage might not be able to protect them. Someone had to take the blame. One of the true sages gritted his teeth. Sixth Highness, we know what to do. However, under the hexagram, how do we escape? If they could break the seal and escape, they would have done so long ago. Why do they have to hold on until now? Li Yijo's eyes turned even redder. My Western Desolation has a forbidden technique that can be used at the crucial moment. To protect you, I will retreat. Halfway through his words, it didn't stop the 2 Western Desolation true sages from understanding what he was referring to. Their expressions instantly changed. However, Very quickly, an ominous glint appeared in their eyes. As the saying goes, a man must be ruthless. Between life and death, they couldn't care too much anymore. After all, these people were going to die sooner or later. Since that was the case, they might as well sacrifice one of their lives to ensure that they could escape. There was no need to communicate. Looking at the two true sages' expressions, Li Ijo already understood. He immediately shouted, "Sages, please help me." A moment later, the people of Western Desolation who were struggling to survive under the hexagram all paled. They turned their heads to look at Li Ijo, their eyes wide with disbelief. Then, like a leather water bag that had been filled with too much water, with muffled sounds, the remaining people of Western Desolation exploded one after another. Large amounts of blood fog rose up, howling as it gathered around Li Ijo and the two true sages. Blood moon. Amidst the screams, Li Ijo's eyebrows split open like a third eye had opened. Large amounts of blood spurted out. His blood was like fire, instantly igniting the blood fog. As it burned, a blood moon slowly appeared within the flames. It was like the shadow of the moon that was covered by the clouds in the dark of the night. It was blurry and only a faint shadow could be seen. But it was this shadow that released a terrifying power. It instantly tore apart space and swallowed Li Ijo and the two true sages. Puff! Avicii Saint spat out a mouthful of blood. His chest was suddenly torn open by the crack in space. He stretched out his hand and touched his chest. The wound on his flesh healed instantly. He looked at the place where the blood moon disappeared inside. As expected of the desolation domain of the upper realm, the best situation today was, of course, for everyone under the hexagram to die. By then, even if Western Desolation and that race were enraged, they might not be able to lock onto them. Just as Chinyu had said, the ancient true sages who had been hiding in World Zero for many years knew about Western Desolation and that race very well. They knew how terrifying they were. It was impossible to say that they had no fear when they made their move today. But now, this possibility had disappeared. But the hexagram was still stable. Before they made their move, the ancient true sages were very clear that it was almost impossible to hide today's attack. Hence, they did not have much hope. As long as they could enter the Flaming Mountain and obtain the item left behind by the ruler, they would have the chance to make the leap and fill the vacancy of the ruler. By then, they would not have to fear the revenge of Western Desolation and that race. Other than Li Ijo and the two true sages, the rest of Western Desolation was wiped out. Beneath the hexagram, there was only that race left. Sir, you have a precious status. There cannot be any problems. Please consider the greater picture and immediately leave the broken world. Two phantoms of the clan elders appeared, their expressions dignified as they cupped their hands together. I apologize for offending you. Without waiting for 327 to nod, the two phantoms roared out loud, source gathering. Bang, bang. Beams of blood-red light erupted from the body of that race cultivator, flowing into the two phantoms of the clan elders like 100 rivers returning to the river. Open. With a loud roar, the void violently shook. Layers of fluctuations rose up, drowning out 327's figure and causing it to rapidly fade away. Rumble, rumble. The hexagram above his head began to spin. Endless blood-red light shot into the skies. In the blink of an eye, all of it was absorbed by the hexagram, turning it crimson. Chinyu narrowed his eyes. He knew that this slaughter had ended. He was happy that Western Desolation and that race had been exterminated, but even more so, there was a chill that came from the depths of his soul. They are very strong. Chinyu, you had best be careful when cooperating with this group of old monsters. You absolutely cannot reveal any flaws. Yao Tao's words were exactly what Chinyu was thinking. Looking at her, Chinyu took a deep breath and said, "My name is Virtuous Nine Lives." Yao Tao smiled. "Don't worry, I won't expose you." As she spoke, her eyes flashed, and she looked up. Chinyu also sensed something. As his eyes fell on the area around him, space shook and 6 figures stepped out. Seamless Saint smiled and cupped his hands together. Your Excellency, virtuous 9 lives, we have already cleared away all obstacles according to our agreement. We can now board the ship. Chapter 1383. Chinyu cupped his hands, great sages. This praise came from the bottom of his heart. Until now, West Desolation and that race had never thought that they would be wiped out by the rogue cultivators of the Broken Realm. Seamless Sage smiled. We were prepared. We were just caught off guard. Just as they were about to enter the main topic, someone interrupted. Who is she? His tone was cold and filled with dissatisfaction. Yao Tao raised her eyebrows and smiled. Me? Another ancient true sage said, the daughter of the Peach Garden. If the Garden Master was here, she might be qualified to participate in this matter. You should leave now. She was being scolded. Yao Tao's smile widened. However, her beautiful eyes were filled with coldness. All true sages were proud. To be able to climb to the peak of cultivation, they naturally had the qualifications. Moreover, with the aptitude of a soul seed avatar, it was 10 times or even 100 times more difficult to achieve today. In order to stay by Qin Yu's side, she had no choice but to reveal her shameless side. Even though she did not care about his coldness, it would be a lie to say that Yao Tao was not annoyed and angry. In other words, the true sage of the big space and small space happened to choose one. Yao Tao was not in a good mood, so she ran into trouble. Qin Yu frowned. Then he calmed down. Since Yao Tao wanted to stay, she could only solve the problem herself. However, this situation should not be difficult for her. While thinking, Yao Tao took a step forward and repeated what she said, me? Her voice didn't change, and her tone didn't change either. But with just a step of difference, the feeling she gave off was earth-shattering. Like a phoenix spreading its wings, her eyes were wide, open, and cold. Between her mouth and tongue, flames were rolling. It was as if she could destroy the world at any time. Horrifying and terrifying. Apart from Qin Yu, everyone, including Seamless Sage, had a change of expression. Obviously, they did not expect that a junior that they did not think highly of would have such terrifying strength. Strong, very strong. So strong that it made their hearts palpitate. The peak of true sage was without a doubt. Then, the ancient true sages reacted. The person in front of them was not Yao Tao. Instead, she was an ancient existence that was not inferior to them. This was because at this moment, the aura that Yao Tao was releasing revealed a dim but incomparably dense aura of time. Others might not be able to sense it, but as an old monster, he could keenly sense it. True divine, Seamless cupped his hands together. I do not know the identity of this fellow Taoist. If I have offended you in any way, I ask that you forgive me. I, Seamless, welcome you to join us. Cultivators did not differentiate between men and women. The only thing they recognized was cultivation. Yao Tao. After reporting her name, Yao Tao glanced across at the large and small space true saints. Then, she returned to Qin Yu's side and took his hand without hesitation. Under the current circumstances, this was the most direct and forceful declaration. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. But before he could say anything, Yao Tao's voice sounded out in his mind. This group of old monsters is very strong, and they definitely don't have any good intentions. Doing this will cause them to dread us a bit more and reduce the chances of trouble. That was the truth. After thinking for a while, Qin Yu suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and maintained a calm expression. He looked at the few ancient true sages and said, "If no one has any objections, let's go." Without batting an eyelid, Qin Yu pulled out his arm and avoided Yao Tao's soft chest. Then, he was the first to fly towards the ship. "9 virtuous sage, you damned ghost, wait for me," Yao Tao coquettishly shouted. She stood up and chased after him. She pouted, her face flushed red with anger. She didn't have the slightest bit of the World Annihilation Phoenix's domineering attitude from before. Seamless Sage frowned. Then, he composed himself and said, "Everyone, let's go." Whoosh, whoosh, everyone shot into the skies. Feeling Yao Tao approaching him, Qin Yu frowned. Do you understand the principle of going too far is as bad as not enough? Doing this will only arouse suspicion. Yao Tao blinked. Is that so? I don't understand. Can you teach me? Bah, if you don't understand, do you think I'll stand upside down and drink water? Qin Yu turned and glared at her. Her eyes were filled with coldness. Yao Tao shrank back and pouted. Don't look at me like that. I'm afraid. Fine, fine. I'll speak the human language. Don't you think it's a good choice to make them doubt us? Then, when they're about to do something, they will suddenly discover that our relationship is much closer than they thought. We can catch them off guard. Qin Yu's face was stiff. He thought, when did the relationship between the two of us become so close? How come I didn't know? He was too lazy to speak with her. He sped up a little and pulled open the distance between them. Soon, there was a light thud as Qin Yu landed on the ship. The smell of blood surged in his nose and mouth. It felt as if the smell of blood was far more active than the last time he boarded the ship. Yao Tao and the ancient true saints followed close behind and boarded the ship. There was no time to think too much. Qin Yu quickly suppressed his thoughts. He turned to look at them and said, I think all of you are aware that driving the ship requires not only a key, but also a high-quality energy. He pointed a finger at the blood-red hexagram. So, I'll have to trouble all of you. The great space, true saint sneered. We didn't agree to provide energy to drive the ship. Thinking about it, it was because he had suffered losses at the hands of Seamless Sage and Yao Tao. He was in a bad mood and wanted to redeem some face for himself. However, it was obvious that he had chosen the wrong person. Qin Yu looked at him indifferently and said, Oh, if the sages don't agree, I naturally can't force you. Then let's get off the ship and discuss the results before deciding how to drive the ship. He turned to leave, but was stopped by Seamless Sage. Sir Virtuous Nine Lives, please don't be angry. We are willing to provide the energy to drive the ship. As he spoke, he looked at the great space true saint. I believe that Brother Su Yin won't have any objections. Great space true saint Su Yan's complexion paled. He clenched his teeth and coldly snorted. I don't care what you want to do. Qin Yu looked at Su Yan, a bit more vigilant in his heart. For someone to cultivate to the true saint realm and live for such a long time, it was impossible for him to be a brainless and reckless person. In other words, it was likely that what Qin Yu saw now was only a side of Su Yan that Su Yan deliberately revealed. Once an impression was formed in one's mind, it would be extremely stubborn and would greatly affect one's judgment. Qin Yu did not wish for himself to make a mistake in the future and fall into a trap for no reason. Of course, there was no need to show what he was thinking in his heart. Hence, Qin Yu's cold eyes revealed a hint of mockery as he glanced at Su Yin, whose complexion was getting uglier. Regardless of whether this person was standing on a stage or not, he had to be a qualified actor. Thank you, true sages. Qin Yu flipped his hand, and the two keys that he had obtained from the West Desolation and the other race appeared in his palm. The ship seemed to have sensed something. Buzz, buzz. Slight vibrations came from the interior of the ship. There was a hint of desire and excitement. The smell of blood in the air became even stronger. Seamless Sage's eyes flashed, and he said in a deep voice, Everyone, let's join hands and summon the six-pointed star to drive the ship. The six ancient true saints formed their hand seals at the same time, and a crimson six-pointed star that had eaten its fill of fresh blood flew over. As it got closer to the ship, its size shrunk rapidly. When it reached the ship, it was only the size of an adult's head. The color of the six-pointed star became even redder. When one looked at it, one could see countless waves of blood rolling around. Distorted faces appeared one after another and were broken into pieces. Qin Yu frowned. He could clearly feel that at this moment, the buzzing sound of the six true saints was getting stronger, and there was a hint of greed in it. The smell of blood in his mouth and nose was getting stronger. He felt uneasy as he glanced at the six ancient true saints. However, he could not sense anything. This was normal. If a group of old monsters that had lived for countless years were so easily detected by others, they would have died many times over. How could they have lived until today? There was a problem. However, since things had reached this stage, there was no choice but to release the arrow. Of course, there was one more thing that could be said. The skilled were bold. That's right, it was because one was strong enough. Even if there was a problem, one could still solve it. Feeling the two keys struggle free, Qin Yu loosened his grip. He simply didn't he needed to activate them to fly out and integrate into the ship. At the next moment, the ship under his feet seemed to be activated. It opened its greedy mouth and swallowed the blood-red six-pointed star. Then, an incomparably thick blood-red color instantly shrouded the entire ship. At the same time, a howl that was as sharp as a rusty nail suddenly rang in his ears, piercing into his brain fiercely. Qin Yu groaned, and his face turned pale. Of course, his performance was 30% real and 70% fake. He looked at the other side. The ancient True Saint group seemed to be prepared. They were not afraid of the attack at the soul level. All of them looked extremely calm. When Qin Yu looked at them, they also looked at him. There was an inexplicable meaning in their eyes. Rumble, a low and loud sound, came from the inside of the ship. It was like a huge turbine that was activated. While it released a surging force, it also caused the ship to shake violently. The ship slowly moved forward. Success. In the eyes of the Avicii saint, there was a trace of hidden excitement. He took a deep breath and said slowly, "There is still a period of time before we can pass through the super explosive space turbulence. Before that, what we need to do is to resist the vengeful spirits on the ship." After a slight pause, he looked at Qin Yu and said, "If the two of you are not prepared in advance, you have to be more careful. The vengeful spirits on the ship are still very strong." He turned around and quickly disappeared in the blood-red color. The big and small space True Saints had cold eyes. They glanced at Qin Yu and Yao Tao before turning around and walking in another direction. The three ancient True Saints who had the lowest sense of presence and didn't speak after seeing each other, nodded and said, "The two of you have to be more careful." Soon, only Qin Yu and Yao Tao were left on the deck. The blood-red color in front of them was like a sea. There were mournful howls in their ears. Shadows kept flashing past. The murderous aura invaded their minds, causing their bodies to tense up instinctively. To put it simply, it was like two living people had fallen into the underworld of ghosts. Qin Yu frowned. He wasn't really afraid of the blood-red color and the vengeful spirits hidden in the darkness. Rather, it was because Yao Tao was sticking close to him again. Her warm and soft touch touched his arm. Qin Yu retreated a little, but he didn't succeed. Instead, Yao Tao hugged him even tighter. "Don't go, I'm scared." Her voice trembled and her body trembled. The more they touched, the more they collided. Qin Yu stiffened. He turned to look at her. Yao Tao's face was pale, and the fear in her eyes didn't seem fake. This woman was actually afraid of ghosts? Even though Qin Yu's rationality told him not to believe her, he hesitated and didn't try to pull back. He glanced at the deck. He could clearly see that there were countless tear marks on it. The ship was about to enter the super explosive space turbulence. Continuing to stay here was not a wise choice. He took a deep breath and calmed his mind. He tried not to make any noise and said, "Let's go in too." Yao Tao nodded again and again. She followed beside him, and the two of them disappeared into the blood-red color. There was no one on the deck. But not long after Qin Yu and Yao Tao left, a pair of eyes appeared where they had been. It was hard to describe just what sort of eyes these were. Sometimes they were clear, and sometimes they were cruel and ruthless. They stared in the direction the two of them left in, gradually revealing a burning heat. Woo woo woo, a cold wind blew past. The blood-red color tumbled, and the pair of eyes that appeared vanished from sight. Rumble, rumble, violent sounds came from outside. The entire ship violently shook. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred. He knew that they had entered the super explosive space turbulence. Although he knew that the Western Desolation and that race relied on this ship to enter and exit Blaze Mountain, it was still something that was stolen. Moreover, the original owner had been killed and thrown into the ship to drive it. Qin Yu had no idea whether or not there would be any problems, and now was clearly the time to test it out. The good news was that no accident occurred. The entire ship emitted a blood-red light, as it forcefully resisted the tearing of the turbulent space turbulence. At the same time, the fiercely shaking ship also began to stabilize. Chapter 1384. The ship had been destroyed, and the group of them had racked their brains to think of all sorts of methods. But in the end, they had all been exterminated. Such a tragic event hadn't occurred. Chinyu secretly let out a sigh of relief. But his expression didn't relax at all. This was because the blood-red coldness in front of him was constantly trying to seep into his body. This wasn't a good feeling. In truth, to a high-level cultivator, these resentful spirits were nothing more than fragile ants that could be casually erased. But there were no absolutes in this world. There were always exceptions. For instance, this ship that had experienced countless blood sacrifices and killed countless lives. After endless years of accumulation and under the influence of the sacrificial array formation, no one knew just what sort of terrifying existence would be born. But even so, with Yao Tao's cultivation, there was no need for her to show such fear and helplessness, right? Still, this feeling was very real. Women were indeed born actors, and this was especially true for beautiful women. Thinking this, Chinyu looked back at Yao Tao. After entering the cabin, this woman had been quiet for a long time. At this time, her eyes were closed, and she was leaning against a corner of the cabin. Her curled-up body was like a weak little animal. She had actually fallen asleep. Chinyu narrowed his eyes and suddenly frowned. Something was wrong. Shua. Chinyu's figure flickered, and he arrived in front of Yao Tao. His complexion was dignified, surprise in his eyes. He hadn't realized when this woman had fallen into a trap. Chinyu didn't rashly attack. He didn't try to wake Yao Tao up. After a moment of hesitation, he reached out a hand and slowly touched the point between her eyebrows. The moment his finger touched the cool skin between her eyebrows, a powerful pulling force suddenly erupted, instantly bringing Chinyu into an illusion. Blood, a lot of blood. It flooded the entire world. His nose and mouth were filled with a thick smell of blood that left him breathless. Suddenly, a hand appeared and frantically swiped at it. The world in front of her suddenly became clear and then violently shook. So it wasn't blood that flooded the world, but blood that covered her face. But to her, this didn't seem to make any difference. Perhaps it was because he had entered an illusion, but Chinyu was able to clearly feel the fear and despair she felt as she fled. Flee! She crazily fled. There was no direction, no destination. She didn't dare to stop at all. Dead, they were all dead. Intense fear nearly destroyed her ability to think. The scenes that Chinyu saw were mostly distorted and incomplete. But this didn't prevent him from deducing the approximate outline. Who did all of this? Why was she being hunted? Could this matter be related to the peach orchard? The third point was quickly rejected. This was because if it was really the peach garden that attacked, it meant that Yao Tao had already been exposed. With the peach garden master's means, she would definitely not give her the slightest chance to escape. It was also because Chinyu was now sure that what he was experiencing right now wasn't an illusion, but some sort of memory reading. The main character was Yao Tao. Suddenly, the scene changed, and a bottomless pitch-black hole appeared in front of him. An extremely cold and gloomy aura kept coming out from it. The scene changed, and it was as if a peach had turned around to look, and a group of black shadows were chasing after it. She jumped off the cliff. The cave was very dark, so dark that one couldn't even see their own fingers. The cave was very cold, the kind of cold that penetrated deep into one's bones. Moreover, it was very, very deep. After Chinyu jumped in, he rapidly fell down as if there was no end. There were ghosts in the cave. In Chinyu's eyes, this was a place where negative yin and cold energy gathered. It was a natural array that could automatically absorb the surrounding souls. Being sucked into it was like falling into purgatory, forcefully turning one into a violent creature that could be called a ghost. The fallen Yao Tao became sweet food in their eyes. Countless ghosts swarmed over from all directions. They stirred up the Yin wind and made woo-woo sounds as they desperately drilled into Yao Tao's body. They all wanted to devour her soul and occupy her body. The battle between the ghosts began with Yao Tao's body as the battlefield. They crazily bit and devoured each other in an attempt to become the final victor. Because of the slaughter of the ghosts, Yao Tao was temporarily able to survive, but it was impossible for her to not be implicated. Every ghost wanted to eat her. As they fought, they didn't forget to take a bite out of her so that she wouldn't be swallowed whole. Thus, the state of 10,000 ghosts devouring one soul was created. Nowadays, the world situation had stabilized, and there were very few large-scale battles that erupted. The once popular ghost path had gradually faded away, and there were very few new cultivators that were able to hear anything about the ghost path. But to some old antiques that had lived for countless years, 10,000 ghosts devouring one soul was something that left them aghast. For instance, the stone pagoda. His eye was filled with shock and emotion. He took a deep breath and slowly said, "No wonder she has such a cultivation level with her soul-dividing stage talent. This woman is amazing." The scene changed again. After an unknown period of time, Yao Tao suddenly opened her eyes from the ground. Her black pupils had completely vanished, leaving behind only a pale gray color. Thus, the tribulation of 10,000 ghosts arrived. The countless ghosts that tried to devour Yao Tao's soul revealed looks of panic, as if they had encountered something extremely horrifying. As they screamed, they loosened their jaws and fled. Yao Tao screamed at the sky, and her voice seemed to be extremely lethal to the specters. The specters that were trying to escape in fear all exploded into dust, forming clouds of black and red mist. As her screams fell, Yao Tao took a deep breath. Countless black and red fog howled towards her and submerged into her body. But to Yao Tao, this process didn't seem to be enjoyable at all. Or, it would be more accurate to say that she was withstanding torment. The surface of her body constantly bulged out, and then her flesh and blood rapidly cracked apart. These cracks formed a twisted face that wanted to tear apart her flesh and blood and rush out from her body. Qinyu was only a bystander and couldn't personally understand what Yao Tao was feeling right now. But he could sense her pain and despair. This was a memory reading. In other words, everything that happened to Yao Tao. Qinyu suddenly understood why she had felt such fear before. It was likely that the resentful spirits on the ship and the environment had caused her to recall these memories. However, for these resentful spirits on the ship to choose Yao Tao as their target, it might not have been a wise decision. A resisting strength suddenly pushed Qinyu's consciousness out. His heart shrank as if it had been grasped by a giant hand. As his feet fell, Qinyu drew backwards. In the next moment, the unconscious Yao Tao opened her eyes. They were all gray and white. Her lips curved up in a sneer. When contrasted with Yao Tao's pale complexion, it caused her entire temperament to change. She was cold and mysterious, like a fairy walking in the darkness, easily harvesting everything. She glanced at Qinyu, interest clearly flashing in her gray eyes. Then, she opened her mouth and screamed. No, Yao Tao didn't make sound. Rather, what she released was a short and violent tremor. Qinyu's mind instantly blanked out. Found you. Yao Tao suddenly spoke. She gently licked the corners of her lips and then turned around and grasped behind her. Although there was clearly nothing there, there was a dull popping sound in her palm. It was clear that she had caught something. A shadow struggled to appear. It had countless tentacles, and each tentacle was covered with eyes. At this time, a massive number of tentacles were tightly wrapped around Yao Tao's arm, but they couldn't harm her at all. It was as if in her pale state, all ghosts and monsters were nothing but cabbages to her. Little thing, your courage is quite good. Or did you know that big sister has been sleeping for too long and is feeling a little hungry, so you delivered yourself to my doorstep? Then, I won't be polite. Yao Tao smiled and drew back her hand. She pulled the tentacle shadow closer and opened her mouth to suck in a deep breath. With a dull popping sound, The tentacle shadow was torn to pieces. Countless fragments tumbled about, submerging into Yao Tao's body. Hiccup, Yao Tao comfortably patted her belly. Not bad, not bad. The taste is wonderful. In my words, you can eat more. Suddenly, she frowned, as if she were tasting something else. Yao Tao made her move again, and a low, muffled sound rang out, as if some kind of taut string had suddenly been snapped by force. Her gray eyes stared ahead, and her lips curved up once more. I was wondering why such a small thing dared to attack me. So there was a big fellow behind me. You're just a little timid. You dare to do it, but don't dare to admit it. Why are you running so fast? Yao Tao licked the corner of her lips again. It was as if she was muttering to herself, but also as if she was making a public announcement. Just you wait. I will definitely eat you. After saying that, she suddenly frowned, and a hint of dissatisfaction appeared in her eyes. But soon, as if they had reached an agreement, Yao Tao glanced at Qinyu, smiled, and closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, her pale eyes had returned to normal, and the mysterious aura of a night elf had disappeared. Yao Tao forced a smile. Her pale face was pitiful. She didn't scare you just now, right? Qinyu shook his head, his expression solemn. Just now. My second personality. Yao Tao pursed her lips. You should have guessed it. It was at that moment that she appeared. I hate this feeling of having control of my body suddenly taken away, but I have to admit that if it weren't for her, I would have died. She looked at Qinyu. If you want to protect Peach Girl from harm, then this is the best chance to kill me. Otherwise, please protect me well because I really am a little scared. She closed her eyes. This time, Peach Girl really did fall asleep. It was clear that the appearance of her second personality had taken a tremendous toll on her. Qinyu frowned. He had to admit that Yao Tao's words did tempt him a little. It was impossible for Yao Tao to remain an avatar. If she wanted to live, then Peach Girl would have to die or be swallowed up and fused with. But this wasn't important. What was important was that Ning Ling, who was also a Soul Seed avatar, would inevitably be implicated. This was something that Qin could not allow. But if he wanted to kill her, not to mention whether or not her second personality would suddenly appear, his intuition warned him that recklessly killing her might not be the right choice. It was also because of this that Qin hadn't tried to kill Yao Tao, even after seeing her. If he didn't kill her, he might be able to do something else. For instance, he could lay down some spells so that he could counter her in the future. He certainly had to ask the Stone Pagoda about this. As a nearly omnipotent being, he had forced her to put on an act before. Now was the time to show his strength. The Stone Pagoda refused. Master, it would be best for you to put away such thoughts. As a survivor of the 10,000 ghost devouring soul, and one who even swallowed 10,000 ghosts, Yao Tao's soul has undergone an inconceivable transformation. If it weren't for the fact that she was congenitally deficient and only had a mere soul seed, I fear that the position of Vasyong ruler would have long since ceased to exist. Chapter 1385. Li Siji's face was pale, and his eyes were filled with fear. He had known about the broken world of the southwest desolate region a long time ago. Even though he had publicly stated that he was cautious and took the southwestern desolate region's shattered world seriously more than once, he didn't dare to underestimate it. However, in reality, the arrogance of the upper realm prince still existed. He had an instinctive sense of superiority towards the living beings in a broken world. But today, reality had taught Li Siji a cruel and bloody lesson. West Wasteland and that race had almost been wiped out. These broken world cultivators had seized the ship and used it as a fuel for the blood sacrifice. They had already charged into the super explosive spatial turbulence. Their target was the blazing mountain. Damn it, how could they dare to do such a thing? The Western Wasteland and that race would definitely not let this matter rest. They would definitely pay a painful price for their actions. But that was a matter for the future. Right now, there was only one thought in Li Siji's mind. He must not be discovered. Yes, he was on a ship. Previously, it was mentioned that the ship was jointly built by the Western Wasteland and that race. It was the key to entering and exiting the super explosive space turbulence and exploring the Flame Mountain. This kind of thing, of course, had to be left behind in case of emergencies. The cabin Lee CG was in now was one of them. It was a secret room inside the ship's hull. It was impossible to enter using conventional methods, but after going through special arrangements, it was hidden inside and very difficult to be discovered. He had to wait until the ship entered the Mountain of Flames. When the Broken World cultivators left the ship to explore, the chance he was waiting for would come, to take the ship away. At that time, these powerful Broken World cultivators would be trapped in the Flaming Mountain. All of them would die here. No one knew that when the war was in full swing and the killing was raging, the third prince of the West Wilderness had already quietly hidden in a secret cabin of the ship. Therefore, if things were to proceed normally, Lee CG's plan might really succeed, and he would be able to turn the tables and scam everyone. But since he had said so, the way things were progressing was definitely not like that. The vengeful spirits on the ship knew everything. Unfortunately, the most terrifying one among them had already locked its gaze onto Lee CG. The dark cabin was also filled with the color of blood. Suddenly, as if he had dropped a boulder, the blood in front of him shook violently. Lee CG raised his head, and his pupils shrank as if he had sensed something. Even so, it was too late. Or rather, the thing rolling in the blood was too fast, so fast that it did not give him any time to react. Lee CG could only let out half a scream of pain before it was forcibly cut off. Lee CG's eyes widened, and the blood vessels on the surface of his body rapidly inflated. It was as if something had drilled into his body and was spreading wildly. His entire body swelled up, and his violently distorted face was enough to show the terrifying pain he was currently enduring. All of this happened in silence. In the completely enclosed cabin, the color of blood surged like layers of stormy waves. Lee CG froze on the spot, his face twisted. His flesh swelled and twitched, but no sound came out of his mouth or nose. This scene was terrifying to the extreme. Shwa, a pair of eyes emerged from the blood-red light, staring at Lee CG in front of him. Ruthlessness and coldness alternated in the depths of his eyes. Obviously, it was trying to burrow into Lee CG's body, to devour him, or to temporarily occupy this body. There were no weaklings on the ship. Lee CG, who had snuck in, was the best choice. But in reality, as a prince that was highly regarded by the current desolate emperor of the Western Wilderness, there were some terrifying things hidden within his body. For instance, being possessed was something that could not be allowed. If there were no such precautions, the great Western Wilderness Emperor's inheritance would have already attracted countless old monsters. Lee CG screamed. Not only was there despair in his blood-red eyes, but there was also madness. Within his body, the method that the Western Wilderness Supreme Elder had laid down to prevent his body from being possessed had now been activated. The eyes that appeared in the blood-red light revealed shock and anger. With a loud rumble, the blood-red light in the cabin began to tumble, becoming even more intense. It struggled, trying to leave Lee CG's body, but like a large fish caught in a capstan, it was slowly pulled in. Putong, Lee CG fell to the ground, his entire body devoid of breath. He was like a corpse. But now, lines of blood had appeared on the surface of his body, densely interweaving with each other to form strange patterns that covered every inch of his exposed flesh. In the deathly silence, the tumbling blood-red light gradually calmed down. After an unknown period of time, the fallen Lee CG suddenly opened his eyes and gasped for breath. It was like he had been buried underground for a long time and had finally managed to escape, greedily breathing in the air of the outside world. Slowly climbing up, Lee CG looked down at his hands. His eyebrows furrowed together, and he muttered, "I am Lee CG, the Western Wilderness Third Prince. I'm also the strongest resentful spirit born from the blood sacrifice on this ship. They are both me, and also not me. But that doesn't seem important. What's important is that I have important matters to attend to." Licking his lips, Li Siji revealed a smile. Yao Tao, you whore, we will meet again soon. Shua, with a single step, his body seemed to fuse into the blood-red light, vanishing from sight. Qin Yu was deeply disappointed that he couldn't do anything to Yao Tao. His methods weren't honorable, and his target was a woman? Was that important? If he couldn't even do something like this, he would have been killed off long ago and wouldn't have lived to this day. Glancing at the corner where Yao Tao was still sleeping, Qin Yu sighed, a helpless expression on his face. He already had a premonition that nothing good would come out of being stuck to this woman. Now, his premonition had come true. Let alone helping her, he would have to divert some of his energy to protect her. What a sin! Qin Yu rubbed between his eyebrows. As he was thinking about when Yao Tao would wake up, would he have to carry her into the mountain of flames? His heartbeat quickened, and a trace of fear gushed out from the depths of his heart. He took a step back and hugged Yao Tao. Qin Yu swept his eyes around, a sharp light surging in his eyes and a chilling cold. Something had come. Qin Yu's intuition told him that this other party's goal was Yao Tao. Not only was this woman of no help, but she was also clearly a troublemaker. She was like this when he was ambushed, and now she was also like this. Could it be related to the 10,000 ghosts devouring soul that the stone pagoda spoke of? The chill in his heart deepened. Although the blood-red light in front of him didn't change at all, Qin Yu knew that something had already broken in. It was in the cabin. Master, behind you. The stone pagoda's voice suddenly sounded out. Qin Yu didn't hesitate at all. He turned and punched out. A wild strength raged out, instantly causing the blood-red light in front of him to disintegrate. Vaguely, the outline of a figure appeared. As if it hadn't expected that it would be discovered, it was struck by the punch. With his first strike succeeding, Qin Yu didn't hesitate at all. He held onto Yao Tao tightly as he stepped forwards and punched out again. But this time, he didn't hit the other party. After being punched, the person retreated back into the blood-red light and vanished from sight like a shadow. Qin Yu frowned. He sensed his surroundings with rapt attention, and the fear in his heart gradually dissipated. It was clear that whatever had entered the cabin had left. The stone pagoda confirmed this. Master, he has already left. Qin Yu asked, who is it? The stone pagoda was silent for a moment. It said, a very strange aura. It has the characteristics of both a living and an inanimate object. I have never seen it before. Qin Yu said, you are saying that besides us and the 6 old monsters, there are others on this ship? The stone pagoda said, yes. Qin Yu took a deep breath and then slowly exhaled. His eyes were dignified. It seemed that things were far more complicated than he had imagined. Li Siji rapidly shuttled through the blood-red light. His complexion was ugly and ruthless, and deep within, there was also a faint trace of fear. The man beside Yao Tao was extremely strong. He had actually discovered his traces. Moreover, what was more important was that there was a weak aura contained within that punch. It wasn't strong, but it caused Li Siji to feel the threat of death. Otherwise, with his current state, he wouldn't have been injured by a mere punch. Although he didn't want to admit it, Li Siji knew that it was impossible for him to catch Yao Tao with his own strength. He needed helpers. His eyes darkened. Li Siji suddenly sneered and looked towards a certain cabin on the ship. It was him, Shua. With a step, Li Siji vanished from sight. After several breaths of time, Seamless Saint opened his eyes. As he saw Li Siji emerge from the blood-red light, his pupils shrank before he composed himself. Besides them, there was actually someone else on the ship, so the calmness that Seamless Saint revealed at this time was mostly a disguise. This person could clearly continue to hide on the ship and be the fisherman that reaped the benefits. So why would he reveal himself on his own initiative? It was unclear, but from the looks of it, there didn't seem to be any malicious intent. Seamless Saint took a deep breath and cupped his hands together. I wonder who you are, and what business do you have with me? Li Siji said, I came here to find Seamless Saint because I want to join forces with you to kill Yao Tao and the people around her. After a brief pause, he continued, as long as you agree to help me do this, I will do my best to help you achieve your wish. Yao Tao, virtuous 9 lives. Seamless Saint frowned. Not to mention that these two people weren't easy to deal with. Even if he had some confidence, he still wouldn't agree. To put it simply, who the hell are you? You suddenly appeared out of nowhere and want to cooperate with me. You even want to help me achieve my wish. Are you trying to be funny? If I really agree to join forces with you, then there must be a hole in my brain. After a brief silence, Seamless Saint said, "My apologies. I have no intention of harming you, nor do I want to cause any trouble. So, there's no need to mention the matter of joining forces." Of course, this was because Li Siji's aura was strange and unpredictable, so there was a euphemistic way of putting it. To put it more bluntly, it was to hurry up and get the hell out of here. Li Siji probably felt the true attitude of the Seamless Saint. A gloomy look appeared in his eyes. He laughed coldly in a low voice. "What do you think the others will think if they know that you're a ghost path powerhouse who has hidden himself well?" Schwa. Seamless Saint fiercely looked up, his eyebrows furrowed together, killing intent flashing in his eyes. Chapter 1386. What are you talking about? I don't understand. The corners of Li Siji's mouth curled up slightly. Since the sage doesn't understand, I'll explain it more clearly. A ghost Dao expert who cultivates in the slaughter and soul-snatching mystic technique painstakingly hides his true identity and mingles with a group of cultivators. Do you think they will immediately turn hostile if they find out? Bang! The blood-red color instantly exploded, sending out boundless shockwaves. Li Siji's figure flashed and disappeared. In the next instant, he appeared outside of the shockwaves. The smile on his lips grew wider. Does the Seamless Saint want to silence me? You can try, but I advise you not to waste your energy. Seamless Saint's expression was extremely gloomy. His eyes locked on a Feng Lin. Are you threatening me? Li Siji clapped his hands and laughed. That's right. The sage is indeed smart. His laughter faded and an icy, cold voice squeezed out from between his teeth. Agree to join hands with me. Otherwise, prepare to be hunted down by everyone. The Seamless Saint was silent. His eyes flashed brilliantly, and a powerful aura surged around him. It was as if he could unleash an earth-shattering attack at any time. Li Siji sneered and said nothing. After a long time, the Avicii Saint took a deep breath, and the ruthlessness around him was completely restrained. He slowly said, "I am very curious. How did you know my identity?" This sentence was equivalent to admitting the fact that he was indeed an expert of the Ghost Dao. Li Siji said, "That's not important. What's important is that the sage has agreed to join forces with me." The Seamless Saint was expressionless. Yao Tao and Xian Jiuxing are both very strong. It won't be easy to deal with them. Li Siji said, "If it's easy to kill them, I'll just do it myself. There's no need to seek help from the saints." Seamless Saint asked, "What do you want to do?" Li Siji licked his lips. "Why don't I join forces with the sage and try to make a puppet first? At that time, I'll be able to deal with Yao Tao and Xian Jiuxing. That way, I'll have a higher chance of winning." The eyes of the Seamless Sage flickered. "You want to target the other true sages? I advise you to give up. None of the people who travel with me are easy to deal with. Even if you and I join forces, we might not be able to win. More importantly, we're all on the same ship. If we fight and damage the ship, we'll all be in trouble. So no matter what we do, we can't do it now. At the very least, we have to wait until the ship passes through the super explosive space turbulence and arrives at the blazing mountain." Li Siji frowned. Seamless Saint asked, "Is there a problem?" "Humph. Since that's the case, I'll make my move after I disembark." Li Siji turned around and left. "When the time comes, I'll naturally appear." After seeing him off, the Seamless Saint focused his senses and sensed the surroundings. However, he did not detect anything out of the ordinary. The Seamless Saint's countenance immediately turned ashen, and a ruthless killing intent gushed out from the depths of his eyes. His identity as a ghost cultivator was his greatest secret. Anyone who knew about this had already become a corpse. How did this person find out? Yao Tao woke up. After falling into a deep sleep, as if she had replenished her energy, her complexion became ruddy once more. She looked at Chinyu and couldn't help but smile. "You can't do anything to me, right? Oomph. I told you long ago, I'm like a peach girl everywhere. Why don't you consider abandoning that sickly invalid? As long as you agree to be with me, I can promise you anything. Really, you could do whatever you want. I will make you very happy." As she said that, she threw an extremely charming look at him. Chinyu stuffily coughed. He thought that this woman was much more adorable when she was asleep. She had just woken up and was already acting crazy. He turned his head and asked, "What happened just now?" He already wanted to ask, but Yao Tao had fainted far too quickly. There was no chance at all. Yao Tao blinked. "You care about me?" Chinyu clenched his teeth. Yao Tao. Humph. What a coward. He doesn't even dare to admit it. Yao Tao muttered to herself. Then she coughed. "There's a very fierce fellow on this ship. Even the second personality wasn't able to catch him, so he must be quite strong. In the beginning, the little fellow who pulled me into the dream with ill intentions was just a test. This fellow is quite smart. If he directly bumped into me, the second personality would have already taught him a lesson. Now that he's run away, there might be more trouble in the future. A woman's keen sixth sense tells me that he absolutely won't give up." Chinyu frowned. Although Yao Tao's words were incoherent, the meaning was clear. In other words, things weren't over yet, and there would definitely be more problems. This woman Yao Tao, she was truly a great trouble. If there was a choice, Chinyu would be disinclined to bother with her and let her fend for herself. But in this situation, he could only grit his teeth and accept it. But what happened next was a bit different from what Chinyu imagined. It was very quiet. In the following voyage, there were no more ghosts or wraiths attacking them. This was a far cry from what Yao Tao had expected. Impossible. This is impossible. I can clearly smell the aura of greed from him, even from 100 walls away. There's no movement at all. Did he run away in fear? This fellow's courage is far too small. It doesn't match his size at all. Yao Tao was indignant, a bit of disappointment on her face. Chinyu ignored this. He didn't care what Yao Tao was thinking. As long as he could safely pass through this, that was naturally a good thing for him. Suddenly, the blood-red color that filled the interior of the ship began to rapidly recede like a tide. The ship's faint trembling also disappeared. In the next moment, an incomparably hot aura descended. It was like a flame was burning. It traveled down his nose and mouth, entering his trachea and lungs, bringing with it a burning pain. Chinyu looked up, a look of joy on his face. Without a doubt, the ship had passed through the super-violent space turbulence and arrived at the volcano. "Go!" With a low growl, he grabbed Yao Tao, turned around, and dashed out. Rumble, rumble. There was a low and deep roar, like an astonishingly thick pool of turbid water. As it raced through the river, it gave off an endlessly oppressive feeling. This came from the super-explosive turbulence of space behind him. Standing within it and looking out, it seemed much quieter than the outside world. But with just a glance, Chinyu could determine that this was only an illusion that appeared after it had gone berserk to a certain limit. With Chinyu's current cultivation and the intensity of his mortal body, he didn't have the slightest confidence that he could stay here, much less forcefully break through. Here, he had to thank the Western Wilds and that race once more for refining this ship without any hesitation. Looking up, the blazing flames reflected off his face. The burning aura that filled the air came from these flames. Inextinguishable flames. The furnace was excited beyond belief. The feeling it gave Chinyu was like a bull in heat, staring at a herd of plump and moist heifers, its eyes red. But now wasn't the time. If the furnace was discovered by those old true saints, there would definitely be problems. After expending a great deal of strength, and with the help of the erased spirit version of the fire spirit, Chinyu was just barely able to suppress the furnace's crazy actions. Calm down, old iron, that's right. Once those old fellows leave, there will be plenty of time for you to eat to your heart's content. There's no need to be in such a hurry. Chinyu looked back at the turbulent space turbulence. When he turned to look at the volcano, The other passengers on the ship also appeared. Without exception, there was a burning heat in the depths of everyone's eyes. After the western wilds and that race arrived at the soulless land without any hesitation, they had painstakingly searched for countless years. Perhaps it was right in front of them, in this volcano. At this time, wasting time was shameful. Moreover, if they left a step ahead, they would have the advantage. Perhaps this sliver of speed would have a decisive effect on the final outcome. The Sioux family brothers didn't even say a word. They swept their eyes over everyone and then rushed towards the volcano. The three true saints revealed a dignified expression. They cupped their hands together and said, "We will also go first." Whoosh! They turned and left, submerging into the volcano in the blink of an eye. Seamless Saint smiled. After suffering for so many years, I have finally waited for this day. The various saints are so impatient. I apologize for making a fool of myself in front of you. Chinyu had a calm expression. This is human nature. I can understand. But is Seamless Saint not in a hurry? Where did he find the mood to speak nonsense here? He needed to hurry up and do what he needed to do. He couldn't hold down the furnace any longer. Seamless Saint lightly said, "Lucky chances are determined by the heavens. What belongs to me is mine. Whether I go earlier or later, the result will not change." He cupped his hands together. "You too, I will bid my farewells." Whoosh! His figure instantly flew far away, vanishing in the blazing flames. To dare to directly rush into the volcano and not fear the terrifying heat and the burning attribute of the ever-burning flame. It was clear that these old monsters had already been prepared. As expected, they had already learned of the existence of the ever-burning flame and even the volcano. For the cautiousness displayed by the western wilds in that race, it wasn't likely that they had leaked this information. In other words, there was definitely a problem here. But that was another story altogether. Whether or not it was interesting, it had nothing to do with them. Thus, Chinyu only thought about it for a moment before suppressing it. A sharp light shined in his eyes. The old monsters had all left, so it should be their turn next. The furnace was hungry and couldn't wait any longer. And in truth, the excitement in Chinyu's heart was no less than that of the furnace. After absorbing the ever-burning flame, the furnace would transform once more and help him forge his path. Disregarding the fact that he could replace the Garden Master's position and extend Peach Blossom's life, Chinyu's strength would also greatly increase. Those who walked the true divinity path had finally successfully condensed the true divine Great Tao. He didn't know if this had ever happened before, but his intuition told him that there might be a pleasant surprise waiting for him. "Go!" With a shout, Chinyu howled and rushed away. He had already left the ship, and it was impossible to pull Yao Tao along. Although the feeling of her palm was soft and tender, it was still quite good. Cough, cough. Calm down, Chinyu. Are you too excited? You actually have the mood to think about such things. He subconsciously turned his head and saw that Yao Tao hadn't moved. Chinyu frowned. "Go. I'm not waiting for you." Yao Tao wrinkled her nose. "Don't think you can shake me off." As she spoke, she rushed over. But her eyes subconsciously swept over the quiet ship behind her. For some reason, she felt as if someone was looking at her from inside, harboring malicious intentions. Was it that fellow who had been scared away before? It should be right. But if he wasn't willing, why didn't he do anything before? That bastard. Didn't he know that it was an extremely hateful thing to make a girl look forward to him in vain? He really deserved to be chopped into mincemeat. Look, I'm still looking at your legs. You pitiful worm that was chained to the ship. Once I leave, you won't have another chance. Chapter 1387. The furnace was very irritable. It was as if it had rushed over only to be mercilessly rejected by a heifer. Although this description was not very appropriate, it was still very accurate to say that it could only be seen but not eaten, because this was the tragic reality that the furnace was currently facing. The everlasting flame was here. It opened its belly wide and ate. It could clearly feel the high temperature of the flames, but it was like a reflection in the water. In short, all it ate was air. There was no effect at all. It wasn't that one or two mouthfuls had no effect, but that from the moment it started eating until now, it had not absorbed the slightest bit of the everlasting flame's power. It was like an illusion. Chinyu frowned and thought for a moment. He removed the defensive power from his hand, and a burnt smell immediately wafted out. Hiss, Yao Tao turned to look at him, her eyes filled with pity, as if she were a student who was not smart enough. He flung his hand and with great difficulty dispelled the invading burning power. When he turned and saw her expression, Chinyu was so angry. The furnace was very irritable, but in fact, Chinyu was even more irritable. Ever since he entered World Zero, how many things had happened here and there? He had poured so much effort into achieving his goal, but the everlasting flame was right in front of him, and the furnace could not eat it? Are you kidding me? If it weren't for the fact that his will had been tempered over the years, Chinyu would have already collapsed. So right now, he was in a very bad mood. Not only had all his efforts been for nothing, but he was also unhappy that he had been played. How could this be? Chinyu took a deep breath and suppressed the irritation in his heart. Calm down, don't panic. The everlasting flame was definitely here. If he could not eat it, there must be some other reason. He had already passed through so many twists and turns. One more step wouldn't make a difference. But before Chinyu could think of how to find the problem and solve it, trouble had already arrived at his doorstep. Yao Tao was the first to sense it. She looked up with surprise and then excitement. That fellow had actually caught up. Although she couldn't figure out how he had broken free from the chains of the ship, that wasn't important. What was important was that she would soon be able to eat a delicious meal. Chinyu frowned. He looked at Seamless Saint, who had parted the raging flames and was approaching. A trace of gloom appeared in his eyes. Although he was very clear that everyone would become competitors after entering the blazing mountain, and once they discovered something, it would be hard to avoid a battle. The Seamless Saint was unfathomably deep. Chinyu had thought that he might have to fight him, but he never imagined that he would arrive so quickly. It didn't make sense. Erupting a great battle before the situation was clear would only create convenience for others. The Seamless Saint had no reason to do so. If the problem wasn't because of him, then the crux of today's matter must lie with someone else. Chinyu looked at Li Siji. His exposed flesh and blood was covered in blood-red lines that wove together to form strange patterns. His aura was strange and hard to fathom. There was a majestic life force and a dense death aura. This feeling was somewhat familiar. The stone pagoda suddenly said, "Master, the person who fought with you earlier was this person." Everything in front of him suddenly became clear, and he felt as if he had found the right person. He turned his head to look at Yao Tao, whose face was flushed red and her eyes were bright. She was filled with anticipation and excitement. Damn it, the source of all his troubles really came from this woman. Sinful. Li Siji smiled, his voice cold and sharp. "Yao Tao, we meet again. You definitely didn't expect this." Yao Tao nodded. "You've changed quite a bit. What should I call you now? Western Wasteland's Third Highness, or a blood sacrifice resentment spirit?" As she spoke, she looked up and down like an Annie shopping in a market. She was very judgmental. Li Siji wasn't angry. He smiled and said, "Just call me Li Siji. A resentment spirit has no name and is a bit too pitiful. All right, if you want to catch up, wait until I swallow you into my stomach. There will be plenty of time to talk while I digest you." He took a step forward and locked his eyes on Chinyu. "Little boy, you punched me before. In truth, it hurt a bit. Now let's settle the debt." The Seamless Saint's eyes exploded with a sharp light. Yao Tao hadn't spoken much with Li Siji, but she had revealed a great deal. For instance, his name, his origins, as well as the blood sacrifice resentment spirit on the ship. There were many things that he didn't have a clue about before, thus he was confused. But now that he had obtained the key information, everything became clear. At this moment, as Seamless Saint saw Li Siji rush towards Chinyu, he was sure that his true goal was Yao Tao. It was just that he had some misgivings about Yao Tao. So he joined forces with her, hoping to borrow her hand to kill someone. Although he was threatened by Lee Siji and didn't want to reveal his identity as a ghost cultivator, it wasn't the only reason he agreed to join forces with him. For instance, as a ghost path powerhouse that cultivated the slaughter and soul-stealing technique. Every time he killed a powerhouse, he would grow stronger. And no matter how one looked at it, Yao Tao and Virtuous Nine Lives were both qualified targets. Thus, they took advantage of the situation and used each other. This was a tacit understanding. Yao Tao was strong. Seamless Saint had seen this with his own eyes. But Virtuous Nine Lives wasn't weak either. In fact, the feeling he gave off was even more terrifying. Thus, Seamless Saint didn't have any objections to Lee Siji choosing his opponent first. He cupped his hands together and said, "Today's matter wasn't my intention. I apologize for offending you." Bang. Although he said he was offending her, his actions were ruthless. He punched out, causing space to violently shake and the endless flames to be forced back. Yao Tao chuckled. "It's fine. In any case, I will kill you. Even if you did something wrong, I won't bother with it." She lifted a hand and pointed forwards. Her white and delicate finger seemed completely out of place against the space distortions that swept towards her. It gave off a delicate and weak feeling, as if this finger would be twisted apart by a wild strength in the next moment, turning into ash along with her. But the moment this finger fell, Seamless Saint's complexion changed. Surprise appeared in his eyes, and he rapidly retreated. But in the next moment, there was a loud cracking sound like a mirror or a layer of ice breaking apart. It sounded out in everyone's ears. They saw that in front of Yao Tao, space seemed to freeze over. Everything within seemed to have fallen into an ice seal. At this moment, the ice seal shattered, and everything within was destroyed. This even included the strength of Seamless Saint's punch. If he hadn't retreated in time, he would have been caught up in it as well. After forcing back Seamless Saint with a single finger, the smile on Yao Tao's face widened. "Why are you running? Come, let's have a good exchange." She stepped forwards without the slightest fluctuation of strength. Then, her entire person vanished. The next moment, when he appeared, he was already behind the Avicii Saint. He raised his hand and pressed it down. With a loud bang, the space directly exploded into pieces. The chaos was like a pot of rotten porridge, directly swallowing the Avicii Saint. Bang, bang, violent sounds constantly echoed out from the shattered space. It was like some hard object was continuously colliding with the killing power of space. Darkness appeared from within. Like a drop of ink falling into water, it rapidly spread outwards in the blink of an eye. It covered the entire shattered space. Yao Tao's eyebrows arched up. She looked down at her palm. At this time, at the center of her white and delicate palm, there seemed to be a seed of darkness sprouting from the ground. Then, vines began to grow outwards. The pitch-black lines carried with them a deep and strange aura that seemed as if they could pull in one's mind. They rapidly covered her entire palm and then extended upwards. Ghost Path. As she spat out these two words, memories that she didn't want to recall leapt in her mind. Yao Tao's lips curled up in an even wider smile, and the chill in her eyes thickened. Her fingers were like blades. Her nails easily cut through flesh. As blood gushed out, Yao Tao grabbed the seed of darkness and pulled it outwards bit by bit. Shrill screams suddenly sounded in her ears. It was as if countless voices were stacked together. There were men and women, young and old, but they were all filled with despair and ruthlessness. They were like the wailing souls of the dead in hell. When the screams entered her ears, it was as if a sharp stake with burrs had been fiercely nailed into one's ear and then emerged from the other, dripping with blood. At the same time, it brought with it an excruciating pain that went straight into her bones and soul. It was as if it wanted to destroy her mind. Yao Tao's face paled. She frowned slightly, but her eyes became even brighter at this moment. She gently licked the corner of her mouth. At this moment, she gave off the feeling that she was enjoying it. That's right, that's it. She laughed softly and continued to pull the seed of darkness. Bit by bit, she peeled it out of her body. It's been a long time since I've encountered a cultivator of the ghost path. This is really an unexpected surprise. The shattered space that had been dyed pitch black opened up from within. Seamless Saint stepped out. His eyes locked onto Yao Tao, and his pupils shrank violently. The aura of the ghost path. This woman was actually someone who walked the same path as him. No, they weren't the same. It was more accurate to say that she herself was an incomparably powerful ghost. But she was clearly a living person with a surging and powerful life aura. So how could she possibly possess the strength of a ghost? The seed of darkness and the vines that grew from it had already been mostly pulled out. Yao Tao's eyes became increasingly bright. On the other side, Li Siji also attacked. He had already suffered a loss at Qin Yu's hands and knew that he was extremely strong. Moreover, there was likely some terrifying strength hidden within his body. But this didn't mean that he couldn't attack. There were many ways to kill someone, and Li Siji knew many of them. For instance, shattering the soul. He sneered. He constantly flicked his fingers and flicked out motes of blood. Every mote of blood rapidly expanded, turning into blood-red, resentful spirits. In the blink of an eye, there were 12 of them. They had strange appearances, but what they had in common was that they were cruel and bloodthirsty. At this time, they were scattered around, sealing Qin Yu in. Roar, roar. The 12 resentful spirits screeched together. Blood red wildly surged on the surface of their bodies, as if they were blazing crimson flames. Threads as thin as spider silk emerged from the blood flames and rapidly grew in all directions, quickly connecting with each other. In the blink of an eye, with the 12 resentful spirits as the center, they wove together into a blood egg that wrapped around Qin Yu, as if it had some sort of amplifying effect. After Qin Yu was wrapped up by the blood egg, the screams of the resentful spirits instantly increased by dozens of times, or even more. At the same time, the negative emotions contained within these screams also rose up. It was deep, like the arrival of an eternal night, submerging everything. It was incomparably dark, without the least bit of light or hope. The so-called shattering soul wasn't a direct attack to crush the other soul. Rather, it was to drown them in negative emotions, crushing their will and mind. In a state of losing control, they would fall into endless despair or fear. Finally, they would choose to destroy their own soul, freeing themselves with death. In simpler terms, it was to use the interference of emotions to kill themselves. Because of this, even if Qin Yu had an extremely formidable strength hidden within his body, suicide wouldn't trigger it. This was also the main reason Li Siji chose this method. As for the effects, as the most powerful, resentful spirit born from blood sacrifices, it had absorbed the negative emotions of countless dead people before they died. Of this, he had absolute confidence. And in fact, Li Siji's shattering soul was truly terrifying. Even a true saint-level existence would be affected. Unless the egg formed from the interweaving threads of blood was broken, it was only a matter of time before their mind was slowly broken down. And this egg formed from threads of blood had astonishing defensive capabilities. It was nearly impossible to shatter it with a pure eruption of strength. This was because it was an extension of the resentful spirit's strength and was a mysterious strength similar to a curse. Moreover, it was more concentrated on the level of the mind and will. In simpler terms, if one's mind was strong enough, they wouldn't be affected by the shattering soul technique and could break it with a single finger. Otherwise, even if one erupted with the strength of a peak true saint, they still wouldn't be able to damage the egg formed from threads of blood. Chapter 1388. Bang, bang, deep thumping sounds constantly echoed out. The surface of the blood thread egg rapidly swelled up and fell down. Although it seemed as if it was being fiercely struck, the truth was that it was completely meaningless. Li Siji sneered. He thought that he would continue to waste his strength. The weaker one's will was the easier it was to break through, and the faster one would die. Things were progressing more smoothly than he had imagined. All he needed to do was wait. Once he killed Qin, he would join forces with Seamless Saint to suppress Yao Tao. As for whether or not Seamless Saint would interfere, Li Siji wasn't worried at all. This was because he was already fully prepared. But at this time, if Li Siji could see through the blood thread egg and see what was happening inside, he would discover that things were different from what he had imagined. Qin was indeed attacking, but his expression was calm, and a sharp light surged in his eyes. There was no anger or fear, no panic or exasperation. Then there was only one explanation. Qin wasn't panicking at all. In other words, he was deliberately attacking the blood thread egg for others to see. This person referred to Li Siji, but it wasn't just him. It also referred to Seamless Saint and Yao Tao. Well, to be more precise, Qin main goal was Yao Tao. He wanted to use this matter to determine just how strong she was, what method she had, and what cards she had in her hands. Perhaps his actions were a bit despicable, but since it involved the safety of Peach Girl and even Ning Ling, he had to be cautious. He couldn't allow any mistakes to occur in this matter. Moreover, taking 10,000 steps back, he was still a stranger to Yao Tao. There was no reason for him to feel guilty or guilty. So when the blood thread egg condensed, this thought flashed through Qin Yu's mind, leading to his current actions. The soul-shattering technique was terrifying, but to Qin Yu, who had tempered his heart, it wasn't anything at all. His will was incomparably firm, and he wouldn't be shaken by the outside world in the least. In addition, there was also the existence of the stone pagoda. Qin Yu was truly curious. Just what did this fellow eat while growing up? Or just what did it experience? It seemed as if there was nothing it couldn't do. For instance, the horrifying negative emotions contained in these screams were like delicious snacks to the stone pagoda. It would eat as much as it wanted. In this relaxed state, Qin Yu estimated that the stone pagoda could eat for several days and nights without a problem. Master, are you not worried that there might be a problem with Yao Tao? The stone pagoda's voice sounded out. Although I can't be certain of the exact relationship between her and Peach Girl, for a Soul Seed avatar to be this strong will inevitably have an impact on the main body. Qin Yu said, I know what you mean. If there is a problem with the heavenly peaches, then Peach Girl might be implicated. It is because of this that I have chosen to endure it all this time. Since I can't attack Yao Tao directly, I can only use other methods to investigate the secrets hidden on her and the actual situation. Now is the best opportunity. There was also something that Qin Yu didn't mention. He didn't believe that the Seamless Saint could truly deal fatal damage to Yao Tao. This woman acted crazy in front of him, no different from a love-struck fool. But in reality, how could a woman who could force back a descending quasi-emperor of that clan be a weakling? She was very strong, stronger than what everyone saw in front of them. This was also an important reason why Qin Yu urgently wanted to see Yao Tao's true strength. Only by knowing yourself and knowing your enemy could you have a clear plan. Subconsciously, Qin Yu was well aware that as long as Yao Tao had designs on Peach Girl, there would be a battle between them sooner or later. Bang, bang. Qin Yu continued to bombard the blood egg. It was just that the frequency of his attacks was much lower than before, and his strength had also been reduced. Since he had decided to put on this play, he naturally had to go all the way. Yao Tao saw all of this. As she extracted the darkness seed from her body, her eyebrows imperceptibly furrowed. It wasn't because of the pain she was suffering right now. In this aspect, the pain she suffered when 10,000 ghosts devoured her soul in the past was dozens or even hundreds of times worse than this. Qin Yu shouldn't be so weak. At the very least, Yao Tao could sense that he wouldn't be easy to deal with. Li Siji, who had fused together with the blood sacrifice resentment spirits on the ship, might have become stronger, but at least he shouldn't have fallen into such a predicament in a single strike. But what she saw in front of her was indeed like this. She couldn't take this risk. As she said before, Yao Tao was certain that Qin Yu had some strength within him that could help her take another step forward. If she could take this step forward, the positions of her main body and avatar might be reversed. It could be said that this was the only goal that Yao Tao had fought for her entire life. She certainly wouldn't allow anything to happen to Qinyu, even if it was just a possibility. "Come out for me." With a loud shout, Yao Tao forcefully pulled outwards. The final tentacle of the darkness seed was pulled out. Across from her, Seamless Saint stuffily coughed. Because the darkness seed was pulled out, he suffered a backlash. But a sharp light exploded in his eyes. He said, "You are too anxious." Pulling the seed of darkness out of his body wasn't as simple as pulling it out of his body. During this slow process, Yao Tao was also suppressing and disintegrating the darkness seed, destroying it in its current state. Originally, she only needed to continue the previous process and slowly and steadily suppress the darkness seed and deal a heavy blow to Seamless Saint. But she was anxious and quick in her final steps. Although the darkness seed was pulled out of her body, it was still alive. Pa! The Seamless Saint snapped his fingers, and the seed of darkness trembled slightly. Following that, it shattered with a kacha sound. What shattered was the darkness seed, but the one injured was Yao Tao. She coughed, her complexion pale. Countless wounds tore open on the surface of her body, all of them dark red and glaring. They were like the open mouths of a child, terrifying to look at. Comparatively speaking, these could only be considered minor wounds. If Yao Tao hadn't been able to force out the darkness seed, and it had drilled in her body, then with a snap of Seamless Saint's fingers, she would have disintegrated into countless pieces. Seamless Saint lifted a hand and grasped forwards. Blood gushed out from these wounds, condensing into a ball in front of him. He took a deep breath, an intoxicated look on his face. He smiled and said, "The taste of this blood is wonderful. I believe that your corpse will be very suitable to be made into a puppet of the ghost path." Yao Tao lifted a hand and pointed between her eyebrows. A dark red dot appeared, and all the wounds on her body instantly healed. She glanced at Seamless Saint and then turned towards Li Siji. She lifted a hand and pointed forwards. "Yao Tao, you actually took a liking to this man. For him, you would even disregard yourself." Li Siji laughed, his eyes becoming increasingly cold. "Hee. Women are indeed irrational. They believe in something as illusory as love. But the more you care about him, the more he will be your weakness. How can I allow you to save him so easily?" Li Siji flicked his sleeves. Endless blood-red light erupted, covering her figure like a blood fog. Then, as Li Siji clenched his fingers, the blood fog began to wildly collapse. A terrifying strength recklessly crushed down on her. Bang! The blood fog was smashed apart. Yao Tao flew out. She lifted a hand and touched the blood thread egg. But at this time, her complexion changed. Across from her, Li Siji revealed a fierce expression. "Ha ha ha ha. Yao Tao, you've been fooled." Countless blood threads suddenly appeared on the surface of Yao Tao's body. From shallow to deep, this process happened in the blink of an eye. If one looked carefully, they would discover that the blood threads that appeared on Yao Tao's body were exactly the same as those on Li Siji's body. It was like the moment Yao Tao's finger touched the blood thread egg, it was instantly replicated and appeared on her body. Li Siji's eyes burned with excitement, ice cold, and ruthlessness. His breathing became incomparably heavy. "Now, you can't run away." He opened his mouth and took a deep breath. Yao Tao's body trembled. On the surface of her body, the wounds that had just healed began to reappear. But this time, what flowed out from these wounds was no longer dark red blood, but traces of pure white mist. This was the strength of the soul. Or, to be more precise, it was the manifestation of Yao Tao's soul strength. What Li Siji wanted to seize was her soul, a powerful soul body that had withstood the 10,000 ghosts devouring the soul, and had instead suffered a backlash. Once he succeeded, Li Siji had absolute confidence he could thoroughly escape the shackles of the ship and welcome a new life. Yao Tao lifted a hand and touched the dark red that between her eyebrows once more. it suddenly became even brighter. It gave off the feeling that it was filled with blood, and there was only a thin layer of skin that trembled and wrapped around it, as if it could break at any moment. Although the wounds on her body did not heal this time, there seemed to be an invisible sealing strength that prevented the strength of her soul from leaking out. Li Siji clenched his teeth and took another deep breath. Yao Tao's body trembled even more fiercely, but she still prevented the strength of her soul from leaking out. Seamless Saint, if you don't act now, when will you? True Saint's seamless eyes swept over Yao Tao and then looked at the blood thread egg. A trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes. Because the entire process had been far too smooth, so smooth that he hadn't even had time to display all of his preparations. This was far too different from his previous predictions. Whether it was Xian Jiusheng or Yao Tao, neither of them were easy to deal with. True Saint Seamless was well aware of this. Could it really be because Yao Tao had made a mistake after being aroused, causing the situation to collapse and get out of hand? Truthfully speaking, this was indeed a possibility. In his long life, Seamless Saint had seen more than one example of people losing their lives because of carelessness, arrogance, or other reasons. Taking a deep breath, Seamless Saint said in a low voice, "All right, I will lend you a hand." Whether there was a problem or not, he would know once he tried. Stepping down, True Saint Seamless clenched his fist and punched out. Instantly, a sinister wind howled and a sinister ghost face appeared from within. If there was a problem, he would naturally be able to force it out with his full strength. If there was no problem, he could use this method to kill Yao Tao. As a ghost Dao expert who cultivated the secret killing technique, it was true that he had entered the Flame Mountain to search for the ruler's relic. However, if he failed, he could take the opportunity to kill the other experts, which was also a huge gain. Every time he killed someone, Seamless Saint would become stronger. If he could kill all the other experts in the Flame Mountain today, even if he couldn't obtain the ruler's relic, he was confident that he could rely on his own strength to break through to the ruler realm. So, when it came to killing someone, as long as there was a chance, he would do his best. What if he succeeded? Moreover, you weren't wrong. Li Siji was also on Seamless Saint's kill list. The fusion body of the Western Wasteland's third prince and a blood sacrifice resentment spirit, such a strange and powerful existence, was certainly an excellent choice. As for cooperation, it was just a mutual use of threats. There was no binding power at all. Of course, Seamless Saint was also confident that if there was a chance to kill him, Li Siji wouldn't hesitate. Within the blood thread egg, Qin had been closely sensing the entire process. He saw that because Yao Tao was anxious, she had been injured by the darkness seed. He saw that when she tried to save her, she had fallen into Li Siji's trap. Although he was calm and clear-headed and told himself that Yao Tao was destined to be his enemy in the future, if he said he wasn't shaken at all, he would be deceiving himself. If Yao Tao had been tricked by Li Siji and could only bitterly hold on, Qin could still coldly look on from the sidelines. But now, he knew that he couldn't remain silent any longer. Yao Tao couldn't be harmed. Also, reason told him that he shouldn't have done this. But deep in his heart, there was indeed a trace of guilt. This was likely his instinct. Bang! With a loud explosion, the blood thread egg exploded into pieces. Qin stepped forwards and punched at Li Siji. He was well aware that the reason Yao Tao was in such a dangerous situation was because of him. If Li Siji was forced back and Yao Tao regained her freedom, Seamless Saint naturally wouldn't be able to harm her. Puff! Li Siji spat out a mouthful of blood. His complexion was fierce. Impossible. How did you escape? With the blood thread egg shattered, it was impossible for him to escape unscathed. In truth, this question was a bit awkward, especially when he looked into Yao Tao's eyes. What was the saying? Adults can see through things, but don't point them out. If you don't have any eyes, then you must be ruthlessly taught a lesson. Qin Yu's attack speed was faster, and the strength of his fist was stronger. Li Siji's face twisted with unwillingness. He could only abandon the prey that was already near his mouth and raise a hand in front of him. Dong! With a deep bang, he was forced backwards and spat out another mouthful of blood. There was a trace of guilt in his heart, as well as a bit of embarrassment and anger. In this situation, Chinyu wouldn't hold back. Li Siji was forced back by Chinyu. The blood threads on the surface of Yao Tao's body rapidly faded and her wounds healed. Her figure flickered, avoiding the ghost face that was biting at her. Her eyes fell on Chinyu, and in the next moment, her eyes paled. Her second personality. Chapter 1389. You're finally willing to make a move? Yao Tao said indifferently. You should feel lucky. Otherwise, I wouldn't have let you go. Strong and cold. There was no emotion in those pale eyes. There was only coldness and death. Looking up at Li Siji, the second personality stepped down and instantly disappeared. In the next moment, the darkness opened up like a giant mouth and swallowed him. You dare to have ideas about me? Little fellow, you're quite bold. Since you came to me on your own initiative, don't ever leave again. A voice came from the darkness, overflowing with killing intent. Li Siji roared in anger. You, impossible. This is impossible. The darkness violently surged. Muffled sounds constantly rang out, as if it was a copy of Chinyu's experience. The only difference was that Chinyu had deliberately disguised himself to judge Yao Tao's strength. As for Li Siji, he had likely suffered a great loss and encountered danger in the darkness. Chinyu, who believed that his acting skills had reached perfection and was worthy of the title of Best Actor, awkwardly rubbed his nose. He thought to himself, this can't be. How did my near-perfect performance get seen through? However, Yao Tao's second personality was full of ferocity. When she looked at him just now, Chinyu's heart couldn't help but tremble. Luckily, he didn't come out empty-handed. Yao Tao was very strong, but in her second personality state, she could erupt with even greater strength. He needed to observe further. Seamless Saint attacked, punching the surging darkness. He didn't necessarily want to save Li Siji. After all, if there was a chance, these two people would kill each other without hesitation. But now was different. Seamless Saint's attack today meant that he was standing opposite to Yao Tao. There was no possibility of reconciliation between the two sides. If he watched helplessly as Yao Tao killed Li Siji and swallowed him, her strength would inevitably increase. This was the same as increasing the danger to himself. Saving Li Siji was equivalent to saving himself. He could still distinguish this point, so he acted decisively without the slightest bit of hesitation. Chinyu's eyes flashed with hesitation. Seamless Saint didn't want to see Yao Tao kill and then swallow Li Siji. He didn't want to either. The reason was simple. The stronger Yao Tao was, the more danger Peach Girl would be in. But this hesitation only existed for a breath of time before it was suppressed. He moved and stood in front of Seamless Saint. Yao Tao's second personality had already warned him that if Chinyu tried anything funny, it was likely that the two of them would break apart. Being in the mountain of flames, the situation today was naturally the worst. A crazy woman was the most terrifying, and this sort of horror was not something Chinyu wanted to withstand. As for Li Siji, he was the third prince of the Western Wilderness, and he was also a vengeful spirit of the ship. With these two titles, he shouldn't be eaten by Yao Tao so easily, right? As for why Chinyu knew what Yao Tao was thinking, after reading her memories, he learned that Yao Tao had experienced the 10,000 ghosts devouring soul and finally completed the backlash. In addition to the excitement and anticipation she revealed, if Chinyu still couldn't guess what Yao Tao was thinking, he might as well buy a piece of tofu and kill himself. Get out of the way, the Seamless Saint bellowed. He raised his hand and punched out. This punch had nothing to do with the power of the Ghost Tao. It was an upright punch that displayed the demeanor of a peak true divine. For so many years, the Seamless Sage was able to conceal his identity as a ghost cultivator perfectly. But without a doubt, his greatest strength still came from his Ghost Tao cultivation. At this moment, he didn't use it. It could be understood that he was being cautious. He was reserving his strength to deal with any unexpected changes in the situation. But it could also be understood that the seamless sage was watching. Or more accurately, he was waiting for an opportunity. For example, Yao Tao and Li Siji. Both of them were fighting to the death, and in the end, both of them were injured. Naturally, he would have the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. If he could kill both Yao Tao and Li Siji, his strength would definitely skyrocket. At that time, only Xian Jiuxing would be left, and he could easily kill him. Although the chances weren't too high, compared to the expected benefits, it was completely worth the gamble. It would naturally be best if Li Siji was strong. If he was really useless, then it wouldn't be too late to save him. As for Xian Jiuxing in front of him, to be honest, he was afraid of him. But if he attacked as a ghost Dao cultivator, the seamless sage still had the confidence to defeat him. This was the confidence of a ghost Dao powerhouse when facing an enemy. If not for this, ghost Dao cultivators would not have become a terrifying existence that would cause people to pale at the mere mention of their names. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He could somewhat guess what the seamless sage was thinking. He inwardly mocked that this world was filled with schemes. But he wasn't innocent and didn't have the moral high ground to stand on. His thoughts raced. Qin Yu punched out his fist. Since the seamless sage was planning to wait, then everyone would wait and see. As for using his full strength to defeat the seamless sage and then turning around to help Yao Tao kill Li Siji, well, that sort of hot-blooded story wouldn't appear on the current Qin Yu. He had long since passed the age where he would disregard everything because of a moment of impulse. Everything had to be turned over in his heart first, and then he would make a decision after some consideration. Perhaps this could be called the sorrow of an adult, or perhaps it could be called reality. In the darkness, Li Siji screamed again and again. It was a truly pitiful cry. Just listening to it made one's scalp tingle and their hair stand on end. It was unknown just what he was experiencing right now. But as one listened to his pitiful screams, a series of words involuntarily popped up in one's mind. For instance, flay his skin and pull out his tendons, grind his bones to ashes, extract his soul and refine it, and so on and so forth. It was clear that either his acting skills were superb to the point where he could rely on his voice alone to make one feel as if they were on the scene, or he was really being pressed against the ground by someone right now. Qin Yu judged it to be the latter. As he looked at the surging darkness, the image of Yao Tao's second personality's pale eyes subconsciously appeared in his mind. Hiss, a chill gushed out from the depths of his heart. He felt as if he had fallen into an ancient cave of ice. Because he had decided to put on an act, he hadn't truly fought with Li Siji. But his aura couldn't be wrong. His strength was truly terrifying. Even such a terrifying Li Siji had been directly swallowed up by the darkness summoned by Yao Tao's second personality, resulting in the current situation. Qin Yu had a clearer and clearer understanding of just how terrifying she was. The seamless sage frowned, a gloomy look in his eyes. What bullshit Western wasteland, third prince. There was also that resentful spirit on the ship. These two trash were actually unable to defeat a single woman. He couldn't help but feel a bit angry that his best result had failed. But even if he was angry, he still had to act. If this continued, Li Siji really might be killed. At that time, he would be in trouble. Soul come. The seamless sage shouted out loud. He lifted a hand and grasped forwards. The flesh and blood on his fingers rotted away, turning into a viscous liquid that dripped to the ground. His white bones seemed to latch onto some door and forcefully pull outwards. Bang! Black shadows howled out from nothingness. There were countless of them, and in the blink of an eye, they filled the entire field of vision. Woo-woo! Gusts of chilling wind howled. The temperature in the air began to rapidly fall. The source of this bone-chilling cold was the black shadows that flew out from nothingness. Pairs of blood-red eyes locked onto the seamless sage, filled with cruelty and hatred. Umph! The seamless sage coldly coughed. All the black shadows cried out miserably. Their blood-red eyes became even more cruel and filled with hatred. They turned and hurtled towards Qin Yu. Drag him back and treat him as your food. Woo-woo. The chilling wind suddenly rose. The blood-red eyes erupted with an even stronger ice-cold aura. Not only did it target the flesh and blood, but it also affected the soul and consciousness. Beneath the cold, the speed of one's thoughts rapidly slowed down, and the soul nearly froze. It was impossible for one to effectively resist. Every black shadow that flew out from nothingness was the seamless sage's ghost path puppets. The hatred and cruelty in their hearts were the source of their strength. But their life and death depended on a single thought of the seamless sage. There was no way for them to resist. The more time passed, the more negative emotions accumulated in the bodies of the ghost path puppets, and the stronger the seamless sage became. This was the terrifying aspect of a ghost path cultivator. Not only could they wantonly slaughter others to rapidly increase their cultivation. Moreover, as time passed, the longer they lived, the stronger they became. As one of the ancient true saints, the seamless sage had existed for countless years. In addition to the countless ghost path puppets here, the terror of his strength could be imagined. But Chinyu wasn't afraid. It wasn't just because of the existence of the stone pagoda, but because he discovered that the sun and moon force field around his soul had an unexpected effect on these ghost path puppets. In simpler terms, when an orbital puppet broke through Chinyu's mortal body and broke into his body to bring his soul home, with a light sound, the ghost path puppet was cleanly broken apart. Then, there was nothing else. Woo. But it wasn't that there wasn't a follow-up. After the ghost path puppet was crushed apart, it released endless negative emotions, as well as some extremely cold strength. To the soul, these two things could be regarded as fatal poisons. But what was good was that these two things were excellent supplements for the stone pagoda. It didn't refuse either of them. They were both delicious and delicious. This was called crunching and crunching. In the end, all that was left over was the pure soul strength contained within the ghost path puppet. After being killed by a ghost path cultivator, the remnant soul would be refined into a ghost path puppet. All that remained would be a remnant instinct. Pain, despair, and cruelty would constantly assault the puppet. It was like a tempering process, polishing the remnant soul countless times inside and out. Perhaps it was less than 1% of its original size, but its quality had risen by several levels. Simply put, every time a ghost path puppet was destroyed, Chinyu could obtain a piece that was a supreme treasure to the soul. From the perspective of the soul, it was a white and pure, irregular polygon. It was like snowflakes falling down. When it touched the soul, it was instantly absorbed and released bursts of warmth. During this process, Chinyu could clearly feel his soul rapidly improving. It was somewhat similar to the experience when he achieved large success in his body of laws, and his mortal body nourished his soul. Although it wasn't as intense as the strengthening of his body of laws, and the speed of improvement was astonishing, the number today was nearly endless. Thus, pa. The sounds of shattering rang out incessantly. The orbital puppets that rushed into Chinyu's body never returned. Seamless Saint frowned. A gloomy light appeared in his eyes. He was well aware of the state of his own ghost path puppets. They were quickly consumed. Almost as soon as they entered Xian Jiuxing's body, they were directly suppressed and killed. No wonder he felt so much dread when facing this person. It was likely because of this. But soon, Seamless Saint's brows relaxed. His lips curled up in a sneer. He had lived for far too long, so he had many things like ghost path puppets. If you want to kill, then do it. I want to see just how long you can keep killing for. Every time a ghost path puppet was killed, the soul annihilation power contained within would be released. In addition to the accumulated negative emotions, with these two added together, even the soul of a peak true saint wouldn't be able to last for too long. So in Seamless Saint's eyes, Chinyu's actions of massacring the ghost path puppets were no different from slow suicide. Of course, if Chinyu could last until all his ghost path puppets were killed and his soul was restored, then he would have one. But did such a possibility exist? Haha, I, true Saint Seamless Saint, will tell you as a senior Ghost Path Elder that it is impossible. Kill, kill, kill. As long as he could kill Chinyu in the end, true Saint Seamless Saint would have profited. They were only ordinary Ghost Path puppets. How could they compare with the soul of a peak true saint? If he could be a step ahead and swallow Xian Jiusheng's soul, then he might have a chance to turn around and deal with Yao Tao and Li Siji. So, what they were comparing now was who was faster. A sharp light exploded in his eyes. True Saint Seamless Saint's thoughts stirred. More Ghost Path puppets surged out from the void door, crazily rushing into Qinyu's body. Hurry, 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 kill. The more you kill, the better. As for Chinyu, he easily fulfilled true Saint Seamless Saint's wish. The sun and moon force field around his soul sped up, instantly crushing all the Ghost Path puppets that intruded into dregs. It was like an incomparably massive millstone of destruction, recklessly harvesting everything. Li Siji's resentful spirit panicked. He discovered that he had underestimated the strength that Yao Tao possessed. In particular, this strange second personality that had appeared from who knew where. It was simply terrifying. The darkness was like a purgatory. He and Yao Tao were both within, so it wasn't just him who suffered the pain. Yao Tao was no different, or it was more accurate to say that Yao Tao had forcefully dragged Li Siji within, forcing him to undergo a baptism of darkness. The so-called feeling of a baptism was like a rain of knives raining down from the heavens. It wasn't a chilling cold that pierced through one's heart, but layer upon layer, slicing off one's flesh and blood. This sort of feeling, if the degree of pain was multiplied by 100, it would be about the same. Li Siji might not have suffered too much, but this resentful spirit was different. He was a product of the blood sacrifice and had inherited all the negative emotions of those who died tragically, as well as those painful memories. Even so, he still found a heart to bear. He could only howl and howl to vent the fear in his heart. That's right, it was fear. Li Siji's resentful spirit was afraid. If Yao Tao could withstand more pain than he could, then that was fine. But the key point was that she was actually enjoying herself. That's right, Li Siji and the resentful spirit could swear that they weren't mistaken. She was indeed enjoying herself. Madman, freak, demon. Li Siji's resentful spirit discovered to his dismay that choosing Yao Tao as prey was an extremely stupid decision. Remorse was necessary. If he could change this, he would not hesitate to give himself dozens of resounding slaps. However, it was obvious that no matter if it was regret or a slap, it would not be of any help to the current situation. Escape, he had to escape. If he continued to stay here, he would definitely be toyed to death. And this moment was not far away. Li Siji's resentful spirit hesitated. He still had a trump card that could allow him to escape after using it, but the price to do so was too great. Perhaps he could wait a little longer, wait for the Avicii Saint to defeat Xian Jiusheng, and then help him escape from here. Damn it, you useless thing. You can't even deal with a mere true saint. Hurry up and kill Xian Jiusheng and come save me. But Li Siji's resentful spirit did not expect that while he was waiting for the Avicii Saint to rescue him, the latter had sunk into self-doubt and denial. Is my Ghost Path puppet not strong? No, very strong, one of the strongest in the world. Isn't the power of destroying souls and the impact of negative emotions terrifying? No, very terrifying, one of the most terrifying in the world. Hasn't Xian Jiusheng killed enough Ghost Path puppets? No, very many, one of the most powerful in the world, so many that I feel heartache. But why isn't he dead yet? Or to be more precise, not only is he not dead, even his aura has not changed. The Avicii Saint suddenly felt that the Ghost Path secret technique that he was extremely familiar with had suddenly become very unfamiliar, because reality had subverted his understanding. It even made him have an absurd and extremely terrifying thought. Even if all the Ghost Path puppets were killed, Xian Jiusheng could still continue to be alive and kicking in front of him. The moment this thought appeared, the Avicii Saint was completely dumbfounded. On one hand, he felt that this was impossible, and on the other hand, he felt a chill that made his entire body numb. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.